Testing, testing. There we go. All right. I'd like to call this meeting of the Millcreek Planning Commission to order. Today is Wednesday, April 15th, 5 p.m. Commissioners Diane Soul, Niels Lofgren, Sean Lamar are all absent and excused. Victoria Reed is online, and we have a quorum. I'll read our little preamble first. And if you're joining us from the public, please sign in at the sign-in sheet by the door. The Planning Commission is a voluntary citizen board. The Commission's agenda items will fall into two main categories: administrative and legislative. Examples of administrative items are conditional use and subdivision applications. For these applications, the Planning Commission is interested in input about mitigating effects of a proposed development. However, our discretion is limited since we must precisely apply city ordinances and state law. Examples of legislative items are rezone applications and changes to zoning ordinances. The Planning Commission will provide a recommendation to the City Council. We have more discretion in these items. Our decisions are based on recommendations from planning staff and local agencies, field observations, information presented at public hearings, including a presentation by the applicant and testimony from the public. The Commission is required to hear from the public on all items listed as a public hearing. On other agenda items, the Commission may request input from the public, but is not required. All right, let's begin with our public hearings. With consideration of ZM-26-005, a rezone request from the commercial zone and city center overlay zone to the city center overlay development agreement zone at 1285 East Villa Vista Avenue. Carlos, take it away.
Good evening, everybody. Today I am presenting you, as mentioned, an application or a rezone application from the Z zone to the CCAS DA. This is to basically fit or construct a affordable housing multifamily development at, again, 1288 East Villa Vista. The reason why, the purpose of this zone, the CCAS DA, is to allow flexibility on the strict application of our city center overlay zones design standards in a specific. And given that the applicant provides some sort of sense of public benefit, to which we have a certain criteria, public benefits either being publicly accessible open space, publicly accessible parking, or over affordable housing. And to which we actually have a definition. This is a affordable housing that will have to go through the process of actually being identified as such through housing corporations, and it is an application that the applicant is currently going through as he's obtaining also this CCAS DA rezone. And so basically the fact that he is providing with affordable housing or proposing affordable housing will qualify him for a CCAS DA rezone. So just to talk a little bit of the site, again, this is located here in our city center, specifically in Villa Vista Avenue. This is surrounded particularly by commercial zones, which in the city center overlay zone. The uses, even though this is a commercial heavy zone, are mostly residential multifamily units. To the west, specifically of this property, we have recently approved a set of townhomes, in addition to what has already been there, the multifamily complexes with more than 200, 300 units. In comparison, this will be a 23-unit proposal, just so you have a little bit of the context of how the lot looks like in relationship to the neighborhood. Future land use, again, this is a property that is within the city center overlay zone, and it's intended to remain that way. Again, the primary intentions of the city center land use designation is to have retail and walkable mixed-use configurations, as well as professional uses, as well as multifamily condominiums, apartments, public facilities, again, all within our center. We jumped into the site plan itself, and as I mentioned, this will be a 23-unit condominium complex. Basically, required to provide about 20% of open space, which has to be met in amenities, with internal parking, garage, a garage that with an access of about 24 feet. Again, just a 23-unit condominium building. And the CCOS DA definitely shaped how this building is supposed to be looking as per our code. The reason, again, why they apply for a development agreement zone is to be able to change some of the design standards from our city center, given that they provide a public benefit. The changes that are being proposed is essentially what made up this proposal, and therefore allow this building to actually have 23 units. These requirements are basically step backs to the building itself. Typically, under our CCOS code, the developer would be required to provide a 20-foot step back along this street-facing facade, a 10-foot step back along the side property line, and a 5-foot setback on a building or any building over 40 feet in height. In lieu of these requirements, the applicant is proposing, again, a public benefit, which is an affordable housing product. Moving on onto the actual elevations, which you can see here, the front-facing facade, the first level is comprised of at least 86% of brick. The majority of the main materials on this proposal are sliding, brick, again, all accepted under our CCOS ordinances, composed of more than 30% of windows all around the front-facing facade. And despite not having a 20-foot step back, balconies are present, changes of materials are present. Basically, articulation is present in this building, and so we at least have, again, not a boxy building, but a product that is actually articulated, thought out, despite the lack of the design standards that they're not able to meet to fit the units that they want to propose. And so this just explains a little bit more of how that front facade is composed. Again, this is just more of a colorized version of the plans. This is what you would see from Bella Vista. To clarify as well, these all will be two bed units, which is what will determine our parking. Again, we have a product that contains 23 units, all 2 bedrooms, over 6 floors, to which its height is no more than 64 feet, which is allowed over the requirements of the CCOS overlay zone. So again, this just shows you all of the floor plans, each one of the floors, how each unit will be located on the building, as well as the amenities and some ADA units as well that the applicant is proposing. Another fact that influenced this project is the fact that they are indeed providing affordable housing, and our city has affordable housing incentives chapter, to which if we are given a product, an application with affordable housing, then in this case, a complete affordable housing product, then we are able to waive certain requirements of our code again, as incentives to be able to build this affordable housing product. The two main incentives that are being waived in this application are first-story commercial requirements waived. Typically, in a C-zone, commercial zone, you are permitted to build a residential complex, given that you provide a certain aspect of commercial space. This was a use that was going to be asked for this property. However, because they are providing with affordable housing, we will not be having a first-story commercial space on this product. And most importantly, there was a parking reduction. Basically, because they are under this affordable housing, they were able to obtain this reduction. This reduction basically lowers their parking ratio to 1 space per unit of 2 or more bedrooms, as well as 0.25 spaces per unit for the visitor or guest parking. And so with that being said, the project shall at least have, or it is proposed to have, 23 parking stalls, all contained within the garage of the first floor of the building for the actual housing parking of this building. They would need, and this is just an example of how that garage would look like with all of the stalls. You may also see that outside of that building, there are 2 on-street parking stalls. This would count towards the on-street guest parking, which leaves us with 4 stalls. And there is a provision in our code that allows us to use a neighboring property that would either be deeded, leased, or through an easement that again would be given through some sort of easement, deed, or lease that is at least within 300 feet of the proposed project. And so we have a commercial center, if you guys are aware of where the Jersey Mike's is, that it's within 300 feet of this proposal, owned by actually one of the applicants, and has provided a plan to house some the remaining of the guest parking stalls necessary to meet the requirements of our parking code, to which they're providing 4 shared parking stalls on this specific commercial center. And so all of that would need to be placed into a development agreement. This development agreement will contain provisions in regards of uses, ownership, density, etc. Those were provided to you on the staff report. Are probably the most important item on this proposal and in this development agreement will be that there will be some deed restrictions. Again, this will not be a rental property. This will actually be owner occupied. There will be a subdivision plat that will be requested as we move along the process. And so through the process of actually obtaining that identification of being an affordable housing product, the restrictions will be written either by the applicant or the housing coalition. And so we will then just take those restrictions into our own development agreement in order for us to enforce it through, through the lifespan of the development agreement itself. And so there will be some tightening in the terms of the ownership as per what it's required by the folk that do the affordable housing stuff. So, and so with that being said, this was taken through a lot of meetings. Not only did we have preliminary meetings, neighborhood meetings, this application also went through an open house meeting to which 6 residents within 600 feet of the property were noticed. However, staff did not receive any comments in response to this application. This was also examined by the Millcreek Community Council on April 7th, to which the council members moved to recommend the proposal 5-1, recommending additional parking on the property and generally in the city center. Again, one more conclusion is that this is in fact, or this will be in fact an affordable housing, which is why they are able to apply for a CCOS DA, and that, this will still be a product in process. All development will require to meet our minimum zoning and land use ordinances. This will require further review, and in fact, it will also come back to you guys as a conditional use, just due to the height of this building, which is something that is prescribed under the actual CCOS ordinance. So, with all that being said, staff recommends that the Millcreek Planning Commission take public comments and consider recommending the city center overlay development agreement zone with reasonable criteria for the city council to consider. To which I move that Planning Commission recommends approval of application CM 26005 as presented. Any questions?
Wonderful. Thank you, Carlos. First, is the applicant present? Is there anything you'd like to add to Carlos's presentation? If you'll just state your name.
Russell Sorensen, one of the owner partners in this project. Thank you for having me first. I was here Monday night till 10:30 before we got to hear on this. So I just want to help you guys understand this has been a joint venture between three entities, us, Millcreek City, and the Utah Housing Authority. So this has been in process for a long time. Millcreek City's CRA voted to fund a subsidy on Monday night per unit to help this project go. I have several parcels here in the city center. My aim's always been to have for sale product. And, when we were involved, when the city started the city center, I felt like they needed to have a lot more housing that was owner occupied than apartments. And so these small parcels that you see here, they can't be parked efficiently like a big building. So we're stuck with these little parcels, and they're ideal for this kind of project, right? So one of the things that we ask, you hear the word affordable. In all the public meetings I've been to over the last 6 months, people think in terms of low-income housing, and this is not low-income housing. Just so you understand, you have to qualify income-wise, job-wise to purchase these units. They are all owner-occupied. They have deed restrictions for the subsidies that they're receiving. They have to own these units for at least 6 years to recover 75% of the equity they earn. So there's a lot of matrices and a lot of regulation that's built in by the state of Utah. State of Utah's participation in this, they legislated $300 million for, call it attainable housing in the state of Utah. They won't get anywhere near that money spent because this process is so laborious to developers. It's so laborious to cities and so restrictive. But once you get the product here, it's incredible for the 23 homeowners who are going to get these units. They couldn't afford to live in Millcreek for $450,000. So there's a cap on the sales price of these units. That's established by Utah Housing. It's a matrix based on economic indications, just like FHA has loan limits. So do these products. And so those restrictions, we don't have to debate in a meeting. They're specified between the state of Utah, Millcreek City's attorney, and the CC&Rs that get incorporated into the HOA. So it's a wonderful project. We hope that it's a pilot project. We hope that it works, right? We hope that it really does what it's stated to do, because there's several more properties within the city center that you're not going to get a functional use out of it unless you can do something like this. So work with us. We're trying the best we can to fit this building into a good look, into a good use, and hopefully it will benefit 23 homeowners that will make a big difference in the city, right? And there's one more thing that you should understand. These are all first-time home buyers, right? So part of the process is the state of Utah, in addition to Utah Housing, have a $20,000 first-time home owners grant, right? That these guys qualify for. So it helps with their down payment assistance, those kind of things. In addition to that, we have worked out with a couple of the local lenders to try and do 5% fixed interest rates on those mortgages. So there's, as I said, there's a lot of energy that's gone in this to try and make it attainable to highly qualified individuals who we find make our cities better. Homeowners make cities better. And so from a building standpoint, we've tried to meet every requirement. We have articulated this building as best we can. We've kept it under the 74 feet that the buildings surround us are. We think with the townhomes and us, they're going to have a good landscape of height that comes up through that area, a good transitional zone to the neighborhood. And we think it's going to be an attractive building, not just a big square block. So if you have any questions of me, you have any questions about the programs, any of those things, I'm happy to give you my information.
Wonderful, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for staff or the applicant?
I had a question. Sorry, is this working? What did you say the price or the
They're fixed at $450,000,
and that's for a 2-bedroom.
2 bedrooms.
They're all 2 bedrooms?
Yeah, they're all approximately 1,000 square feet, 2 bedroom, 2 baths.
And did you say there was an HOA?
Yes,
And how
because it's a condominium complex.
And how much is the HOA?
It's going to be approximately $250 a month. So
And does that cover the like maintenance, some of the utilities?
no utilities, just water. Water, you know, the main things that you have in any HOA. There's not a huge amount of amenities because unfortunately you can't put into it what a for sale product is. You know, you'll see when I come back here in a couple months a true luxury condominium building, but they're going to be 3 times the price. So, you know, we're trying to bring a balance to the city, you know, and first-time home buyers. I use this. I grew up in Canyon Rim. My brother lives there. He's got 2 kids that are married that live with him that both qualify for this building. We'd love to keep them in Millcreek instead of having them to go to West Jordan or somewhere else. You know, they're great additions to our community. So this is why these ideas came into play. We got staff people. We have people, city employees who are renting from the big buildings that they could now own a home for the same price. We want to keep those guys here at our city, right? We want to incentivize them. So there's a lot of great opportunities here for Millcreek. And like I say, it's kind of a pilot deal. If it works, we hope then to be able to keep it rolling in the future. So hopefully that answered your question.
Any other questions? Questions for staff? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'll open up the public hearing for this application. If you are here to speak on this application, please come to the mic and state your name. If you're online, there is a place for you to submit application comments, which we will read. Anyone? Elise, is there anyone online? All right. We'll close the public hearing for this and bring this back to the commission for discussion.
It seems
Carlos,
that
go ahead.
Victoria has asked for.
Oh, thank
talk.
you.
Yeah.
Victoria, go ahead. Yes, we'll get the applicant back here to answer that.
So the state's program is for the first-time buyers, is a 6-year minimum commitment. If somebody has, and obviously people have issues where they have to sell and move, and in that they forfeit the majority of the equity that's built in the project. After 6 years, the new buyers are subject to whatever the market, however it's raised by and assessed by the Utah Housing is our understanding. However, that can all be legislated differently going forward in the future. So they've in the past, they've eliminated that restriction after a certain amount of years, right? So we don't determine that because the subsidy to build it is from the state of Utah. They determine those lengths. But for you to earn 75% of your equity, you have to be there for 6 years. After that, whatever the legislative bills are, that's what will be deed restricted as to what they say. 6 years. Correct. After 6 years. Yes. Well, it's not an income limit because it's attainable and affordable housing. It's not a low income project. So to qualify for a $450,000 mortgage, you have to make approximately $60,000 a year of income with no debt. So if you have a car payment or a credit card payment, you have to make more than that. So the minimum requirement will be approximately $60,000 of income. Mm-hmm. Sure. Sure, but keep this in mind. The whole goal of attainable housing is that these people aren't being incentivized to have 2 vehicles, right? They can't have payments, right? They can't have debt. So in our effort to reduce driving, and that is the whole concept of a city center master plan, is to eliminate people from cars, right? Not to incentivize them to bring cars or bring people to Millcreek and drop cars off. So affordable and attainable housing has those components because practically speaking, most of these people will not have additional vehicles, right? So it's, believe it or not, it's a built-in mechanism to help us train the future generations to get out of vehicles and onto mass transit. And that's why attainable housing in city centers where bus routes, train lines are readily available, bike lanes, it's part of the mindset to get rid of driving and to be more publicly minded in your transportation. So there's a secondary benefit if you believe in what the city center's mission statement is. Correct. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
I think I have a question now with Victoria's. This might be for the applicant or for city staff, but I think the first time that we heard about this project, which I'm really excited about, I appreciate all the hoops that you've jumped through. My understanding is that the $20,000 first-time homebuyer money that's provided by the state, that can be clawed back if the property owner were to sell it prior to the 6 years. Is that the case? Okay.
So there are a lot of, but understand that the first-time homebuyer plan, it fits any first-time homebuyer buying any real property in the state of Utah. It's not just our project. So if you are a first-time buyer and you buy a home in Kangan Rim, you have the same restrictions on that grant, right? That loan as our people do. So and that's governed again by the state's rules.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And so my next question is, you mentioned that the city CRA voted to provide some funding for this program
Correct.
on Monday. Is there a similar clawback mechanism for those funds as well?
No, it's
No.
because its contribution is to the building itself. So the city went, and maybe Francis can explain how CRA money works.
Yeah, so I mean, the money is paid on performance. I honestly don't know what the breach terms were in the CRA agreement. I can look that up for you.
Can you expand a little bit more on pay on performance?
Well, so it's essentially reimbursed, right? So I mean, the developer builds the building, records the deed restrictions, and then we actually pay out. So I think it has to do with the timing. There are breach provisions in the agreement. They're ugly, but it really is the city's leverage is that we only reimburse once the building's built, and they can actually get an agreement from the Utah Housing Corporation and the state, right, which would unlock those other public monies, which are then tied to a deed restriction.
So the money from the city is going to the developer of the building, not necessarily to the property buyers?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the property buyers have nothing to do with the city's CRA money. It's all to the structure of the building. And so it's kind of it's a partnership in the truest sense. So let's say we do $100,000 worth of work, right? And we need to pay that bill the next month. The work's done, it's inspected by the state of Utah. They say the work equals the bill. The state of Utah pays 90% of that bill. The city of Millcreek pays 10% as an example, right? And so no money that's in the public, either the state or the cities, is at risk for anything more than what has been completed. So we don't get a check, and we as developers don't get that check. It's dispersed directly to the suppliers and the laborers from both the state and the city.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we as a developer don't get paid till all the units are sold, all the loans are paid back, all of those things. So we're still at the greatest risk with our money until it's completed and sold.
Okay. Thank you for that.
And if I can interject a little bit, the state's mission is to provide and incentivize properties, singular owner-occupied properties at 450 and below, right? Your only incentive is, as a first-time homeowner, is the 20 grand. And then to some of your questions, it is right that you would lose that essential $20,000 if you decide to not continue to sell that house, things like that. So it's more about being, as Russ has been saying, training developers to build this type of units that could have even more incentives in terms of actually building them, but through CRAs, through what the Housing Corporation's doing. Again, get people in there, right? Typically, again, a lot of those units again will be 450 and below, which is as attainable as they can be in our state, right? I haven't seen a property below 290, 300 that is new. And so that's just sort of the thought process of the state, plus what our cities can do by adding more money to building this. But the residents only get the $20,000.
Jenny?
Sorry, to follow up on Victoria's question, sorry about that.
No question.
And maybe we've talked about this already, but so if someone does sell before the 6 years, does that new person coming in, do they need to fit this criteria if it's under 6 years?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, but it's after the 6 years, then it's whatever its market value.
And we don't know that yet. The way it's legislated to us, the way it's written in our agreements is 6 years. So if the state of Utah says, 2 years ago, they funded $300 million to this program. They spent 20. of the 300. Okay, just to tell you, developers are not interested in this program. It's too hard, and our money is limited. Our risk is still the same as if I'm building it for profit, right? But my profit is restricted by the state. So and the application process, the application alone was 240 pages, okay? So right now, those units, fair market value appraised at $520,000, right? So with the help of Millcreek City, we're giving up a big chunk of money if we build them as for sale product, right? And so there's a balance here. Everybody either buys into the concept that we're all trying to build and lift, and that's the whole process that we're talking about here. I can't do it by myself. Millcreek can't do it by itself. The state of Utah is failing at it, even though they're offering essentially 4% interest money to build with, right? It's just when you have so many government agencies overseeing a little, this, you know, it sounds like a lot of money, but for the state of Utah, this is the teeniest of projects, right? So there's a lot of people power to try and raise this boat up and make it work. And so I don't know that the state of Utah completely has all the answers.
All right, one more question. Thank you for answering all these.
Real quick, is the overflow parking, sorry, go ahead.
No,
Was there overflow parking into, did you say the Jersey Mike's parking lot?
yeah. Russ, do you want to?
So I own the strip mall that's the Jersey Mike's is in it, and then we're
Okay.
building a strip mall right next to it, just to the south of it, where the old Tony's Bar was.
Mm-hmm.
So the deed restriction and agreement is on that brand new building that's being built right now, not the Jersey Mike one. So when you see the layout where he showed you, the parking, that's on the, we call it our MC30 project. It's a 7,700 square foot strip mall that's under construction right now.
So that's where people who overflow can park there. Is that just an evening parking or is that all around parking?
All the time. So it'll be a shared parking agreement between, there are two different entities that own the properties, right? So those two entities will have a shared parking agreement that will be deed restricted and recorded. So if we ever sold the strip mall, that still stays on there as a restriction to the future owner.
So if there were more than the 24 parking spots, they can just go over there.
Yeah.
Do they have to have like a thing in their window or something, or just?
I can tell you, I know because of the strip mall with all the building, you know, parking is a nightmare to police right now.
Right, at Jersey Mike's?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, and the
And so-
idea of guest parking right in the city center is that if there's going to be on-street parkings, that's not specifically to certain projects, right? It's for the overall city center. So the effort here was to contain at least all of the residential parking spots within the building. And we have, again, a little bit of that flexibility of providing the guest parking, given the fact that we have cross sections of on-street parking on all of the streets on city center. So by definition, we already have those parkings for guest parking, right? We're just in this case, because we weren't able to allocate those within his boundaries, we asked to do it in another area that he owns that happens to be 300 feet of his proposal. So, and again, because in that 300 feet radius, I think makes sense because again, it's not an overwhelming amount for walking.
How far is it?
About
It's-
300 feet.
About 300 feet.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right there.
Thank
And,
you.
and understand the layout, there will be in the future a walkway between Villa Vista and Miller Avenue. At some point when all of those buildings are finished and completed, there'll be a pedestrian walk through the center of those blocks, which will cut that down also. But right now, you'd have to walk around the block, down to to 13th East and over. And since we're doing the strip mall, we're actually going to have a sidewalk on 13th East when we're done.
Thank you for answering my question. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much. Commissioners, let's have a discussion and a motion. I'll start off. I do recall seeing this at, I believe it was a joint City Council Planning Commission meeting, and I was encouraged by it then to see all of the cogs that have come together and all of the willpower behind this. I'm encouraged to see it now. From what I understand, we're trading off some requirements like setbacks, commercial parking in exchange for an affordable housing product. It's also owner occupied and deed restricted. I want to see more of this, and I'm very supportive. Commissioners?
Ditto.
You know, I think this is a really cool project, but I also am concerned about the parking, though. I mean, yeah, there's street parking, but we have a lot of housing going in that area. We already have parking issues in that area. And, you know, the idea I know Sugar House is doing this too, to eliminate to make it a more pedestrian, well, we're not there yet in this city. And it's going to be a long time. And people who move to Utah don't move to Utah for their mass transit. They move to Utah with vehicles to recreate in and around it. So I just don't think that that's a reality of our city right now or in the near future. And it is something that we should consider. And I don't know that that would prevent me from voting for this, you know, but there's a lot of housing going in that little area, and every parking lot does matter. And I do like that there's an option for people in a different piece of property, but people aren't going to walk 300 feet, you know, to do that. So I think that that's, you know, again, it sounds good, but living in and around that area, that's going to be a reality.
Commissioners? I do have to say, I do agree that the parking is a concern, and that was one concern that the Millcreek Community Council raised. I do think the parking trade-off here is more of a legal loophole than a feasible, pragmatic approach, but it's an option that in this scenario we have the opportunity to take advantage of.
And right after those joint sessions, we actually used to have, I believe, 25 units. So we actually dropped some
reduction.
units, fit more parking stalls. Again, attempt to put them within the building. So the only thing that needed to be taken care of was the guest parking stalls. And so there, you can see the challenge, right, of parking also here. Obviously, we have all of this. Not exceptions, but you know, other ways of providing parking. And also, at the end of the day, we're gonna be changing. Hopefully, at some point, you know, by the time this is built, you know, that there's a little bit of change of car culture as well. Maybe there's more bus lines, things like that. And so, there was again a little bit of effort to provide what could have been possible. Again, I'm just saying that there was a little bit of a drop, you know, in order to actually make this happen. So,
Commissioners, any other comments or a motion?
I kind of echo the same thing about the parking. Being a resident in Millcreek, it is hard, but I do think the affordable housing does in this instance overweigh that. So,
You know, I think too, we talk a lot about, well, hey, when transportation, when this, I don't see it. You know, I don't see a lot of discussion in the city about that. I mean, I know we have a lot of dreams and hopes and visions down the road, but right now, that's not the case. And, I mean, are there finite plans that I'm not aware of?
So I think it is worth noting that, you know, we don't necessarily notice it because I think most of us drive, but there are two high frequency bus lines, right? well, three. There's one on Highland Drive that runs every 15 or 20 minutes through most of the day, right? There's also one on 13th East, and there's one on 33rd South. I mean, we do have a long range. We have adopted the local link study and the 33rd South master plan, both of which call for bus rapid transit on 33rd South and maybe bus rapid transit, maybe streetcar on 13th East. Those are in the Wasatch Front Regional Council's long-range plans, but there's no funding for it yet, right?
And
it's not
is that the
something
same
that's-
with bikes too? Like,
Yeah.
because I know there's been talks about widening streets and things, and I know we kind of keep alluding to these as we discuss this increased development and
Sure.
expansion, but we don't have any finite. And all I see, you know, kind of, and again, I love a lot of these ideas. I think it's great. I mean, it's cool to have a city center, but as you come in and out of the city center, we talk about traffic studies almost every time and parking, and it consistently is getting heavier and busier and busier and busier. And you know, the turnings and making turns in and out of areas, and the backup that's happening along the streets, you know, and then every development that happens shuts down an entire lane for sometimes a year, and that puts a lot of fatigue on the people, and ultimately I think we'll benefit from it, but
Yeah, no doubt.
know.
I agree. Right. I live in the neighborhood too. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I bear witness to what you're seeing for sure. So, I mean, the bicycle infrastructure, a lot of that has been funded, right? We're doing a significant project on 39th South, and Salt Lake City is actually funding a lighted pedestrian crossing at 13th East and Elgin. So that's good. There's currently a crosswalk there, if you dare, but the lighted RFFB beacons will help that. I mean, these are all things that we're kind of picking at persistently but slowly, and I can understand why a lot of folks feel that that's unsatisfactory, because their perception is, not without reason, is that traffic is just kind of bad, right? And potentially it's getting worse. I will note that that all this development that we're doing falls within the greatest impact scenario that we identified when we did the master plan for the city center years ago. We're falling well within kind of the bandwidths, and none of these roads have hit a point of failure yet. As for the parking, you know, everybody here is absolutely right, and you know, staff worked diligently with the applicant to be as creative as we possibly could to solve this parking problem. One thing that gives me a little bit of edification is, you know, I was laughing about this project because when my first kind of home away from home, I had an apartment downtown, and when I had a vehicle, I actually didn't have a vehicle for a while, but when I had a vehicle, I actually parked it on the street, and it was fine. And the nice thing about it is that I could walk to the grocery store, right? It was right across the street. And I could do many of the things that I would normally need a car for without actually having that car. And it was in exactly the same urban context that this building was in. Now, eventually, I moved on, I got a house and whatnot. But I'm kind of, my own life, right, is kind of a test case for how this might work. And we've all been there, right? The nice thing is about this project is that you're within walking distance to a grocery store, which is a major trip generator. You're within walking distance of here, which is a great kind of evening amenity. You're within walking distance of several restaurants, a bar. There's all sorts of things that you can do that are not available to other kind of you know, multifamily, even owner-occupied spots that will make a meaningful impact on the trip generation here.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I just would like to just one other comment is, when we're looking at affordable housing, when we're looking at the increase of population in these first generation homeowners that are coming in, if they're moving in or growing up here, again, one of the major economic drivers for the state of Utah is recreation and being able to access public lands and the resources that we have. And those are not the people who want to just walk in the city. You know, those are not the people that are going to have one vehicle, and it's something to consider, especially in a 6-year period.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I certainly understand your concerns about parking. I'll just similar to Francis, when my wife and I moved here, we moved here with one car. We had a car for a year. We had a little apartment in Sugar House, actually. But we were able to make it work, I guess is just what I'm saying. And I think if there's going to be any place in the city where we are going to reduce the parking requirements, I think it needs to be here in the city center. And I agree, I love to take advantage of these great outdoors, but I think if you're a couple, or even if you have a family, you can make one car work. And like the applicant mentioned, these are going to be for families that are at 80% AMI, so maybe they don't have 2 car payments or something like that. So I think it's possible. It's certainly more of a challenge, but at the end of the day, the people who buy these units are going to know these restrictions ahead of time, and I think will plan accordingly.
All right, commissioners, thank you for your comments. I have to agree, we all have valid points here. I think the benefits greatly outweigh the risks here. I would like to see more of this type of project. I would like to see this pilot program succeed, and all of the cogs and interested parties that have come together to make this happen come together again. And so in the interest of that, I would like to move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of ZM 26-001. ZM 26-005, based on the findings and conclusions as presented by staff.
Second.
Motion by Larson, second by Anderson. Let's start down here. Commissioner Burgess? Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Larson is yes. Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed? That passes unanimously. Thank you so much. All right. Only 52 minutes for that one. Let's move on to item 1.2, consideration of ZM-26-006, a rezone from residential R18 to RM zone and the RM zone to the commercial zone at 1398 East Luck Lane. Brad, this is yours.
Thank you. So what this is, 8, almost 9/10 of an acre piece of property. It's kind of odd shape. Luck Lane's the lane that's right behind or just south of Home Depot. If you could look behind you, it'd be just out the window about 1.5 blocks, 2 blocks away. At the end of that Luck Lane, you can kind of see highlighted or hatched in this this image here, kind of the odd shaped property. And what's unique about it in terms of zoning is there's 3 zones on it. There's a little bit of the pink area on the one corner, which is the commercial zone. And then there's the R1, which is the yellow, and then the brownish color is the RM zone. It's not terribly uncommon for a property to have 3 zones, but it's, well, it's not real common, and it's not ideal. And so the applicant approached the city with an application to consolidate or rezone the property to get it into one contiguous zone. The zone that they're seeking is the commercial zone, and it kind of made sense because the properties around it to the east and to the north are kind of in a non-residential zone. That being said, it is in the current neighborhood 1 land use designation, which is intended for low-density, single-family type uses. In fact, originally on the property there was a house built. I don't know what the year was, many years ago, many decades ago, and it since has been converted into an office use and has been used that way for some time. So it kind of gives you an idea how that property sort of transitioned and what it's being currently used as. I put some Google 3D imagery on, kind of trying to outline the property the best I could. It's not exact, but that red area was what the ownership of the property is. And this is kind of above and just over the parking lot of Home Depot. And I use this image because there's quite a drastic change in topography from this site down to the west. to the residential neighborhood below. And so it really is, even though it's right next to a single-family neighborhood, it's really kind of up above on the ridge quite a bit, and actually feels like the property belongs more to the commercial RM and C zones. And so here's an image of it looking from the neighborhood up towards Home Depot, and again, you kind of see a heavy tree line and how the property, most of it, kind of sits up on the ridge. And you kind of see the roof of the house there as highlighted, outlined in yellow. I will note, these are some images from the back of the property as it is. I'm going to come back to these on a different item. I do want to note a few things. There was a neighborhood meeting held on the 2nd of April. The applicants were there, but it wasn't well attended. Following that, there was an April 7th open house that was held, and it was, I think, decently attended. And I will note that there's and I'll get into the open house comments and some of the outcome of that in just a second, but there's also, the applicant has filed a separate but related text amendment application, and that's kind of one of the reasons behind this rezone. That's on your agenda tonight. That's by design, by intention, to try to put these two. It was noticed as part of a larger code update that also is on your agenda tonight, and I'll get into that. So if you have any questions specific to the text amendment and what it's proposing as far as outdoor reception centers, maybe I guess you can ask the questions, but I want to get it more into it with a separate application and discussion, and because it's, again, I want to emphasize it's related, but I want to keep the applications separate. As far as the open house meeting goes, there was a fair amount of a pretty good attendance. I think we had 8 to 12 individuals, maybe I might be overestimating that a little bit, that attended, including a couple of the community council member liaisons were there. There was a great deal of concern, maybe not quite as much with the rezone proposal, but more so with the text amendment that was being proposed, sort of in conjunction with, or the reason for the rezone. I've got the Millcreek East and Millcreek Community Council recommendations on here that you can see on the screen. These are in your report, so I don't know that I need to reread them entirely. There were some other comments that I received from at least 2 other property owners that are down the hill to the west that were adamantly opposed to, and they gave their reasons, and those were also included in your packets if you had a chance to read those as well. And some of those individuals are here as well, and I anticipate they'll have even maybe want to articulate some of their concerns with that proposal. Being that it's just, there's no development being proposed on the property per se. When I say development, there's no new buildings, there's no new utilities, there's no subdividing of the property, things of that nature. As it pertains to the rezone, we didn't see an issue with, even though it's not entirely aligned with the master plan or the future land use map. For the reasons I stated, we didn't see a lot of reasons to oppose or to add any conditions or anything onto the property. I will say, and I did forget to mention this, because the commercial zone does allow for a pretty wide variety of uses. There's a zone condition that's being proposed. It's not in the slideshow, but it's in your report. And I apologize for not putting it in the recommendation here. But that zone condition would limit most of the uses that would normally otherwise be allowed in that zone. Things like gas stations and, well, pretty much almost everything, but a few office and other types of uses. Again, the property is kind of, the way we see it as staff, is kind of a transition property from the retail to the east, to the residential down below to the west.
Yeah, Brad, just to make sure this is correct, your zone condition is uses on the property are limited to medical, dental, general office, personal services, depository, financial institutions, and reception centers and event centers?
That's correct. Now, as far as the reception event centers, even though we're saying go ahead and allow that, they're not allowed outdoors within 300 feet of a single family zone, and being that the property is not even that deep, an outdoor reception center wouldn't be allowed on this. In the event that the request to amend the text, the code to allow outdoor reception centers. That's why that's in there. So that would just kind of slide right in with that. Again, I have no idea what your recommendation or discussion or thoughts are on that, nor the city council. So it's just kind of hanging in there. If you allowed it, it's not automatically allowed
Understood.
without the second part of that. And that's
Great.
it.
Thank you. Is the applicant here? Would you like to add anything to Brad's presentation?
Thanks for the time to let me speak. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Kathy Wickersham. I'm the owner of Woodhaven at Millcreek Psychotherapy Services. That's the business there at the property. Am I on?
Pull
Can
it
you hear
up.
me?
Pull it up. Speak into the mic. There we go.
How's that? Yeah,
Good.
can you hear me?
I can now.
Lean in. Yeah, I bought the property in 2019 and actually renovated it. Took about 6 months to renovate it. Created 10 psychotherapy offices in the building. Took about 6 months. Opened in March of 2020, March 1st, and March 5th we closed our doors because of COVID. So we were open about 4 days. Did telehealth, so that kept our business going, but we did shutter it for a bit, didn't reopen until 2021. I'm also a therapist, so me and one other therapist started in 2021, and as of last week, we've hired 2 more clinicians. We're at a total of 9 clinicians now, so we're a bustling business as far as group private practices go, and I'm really passionate about the work that we do there. We serve the community. We serve Millcreek primarily. And it's most likely that the people that come in there are experiencing the worst experiences of their life, the most stress that they've ever experienced in their life. And the people coming through our doors are members of Millcreek City. They're your neighbors. They're your friends. They're potentially in your family. They're potentially you. And the people coming in here are, a young mother who's lost her husband in a terrible accident, a father who's lost his wife to cancer, a grandmother who's facing the tragedy of caring for her husband after 50 years of marriage, who's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, children and adults that are dealing with trauma from abuse and neglect, and people dealing with divorce. I mean, it's heavy to hear what I'm having to say, but I can tell you that the people that work there, including me, are passionate, they're energized, they're trained, they're skilled, and they're empathic. And we're hopeful because the people that walk through our doors, we accompany them and we help them to change trauma and challenge and growth. So the work we do is incredibly important. And another piece of that is we accept insurance. We accept health insurance. Most people need health insurance benefits to afford it. And unfortunately, reimbursements aren't keeping up with the cost of doing business. We also help people that don't have insurance, so we offer reduced rates. We offer payment plans for people that have to pay cash. It's a service. And, this is not a business you go into to become wealthy. It's a calling. It's an important service and business that we do here. But it's also a beautiful building. It's on almost an acre. It's incredible what the view from our waiting room gives to clients that come in. They talk about it calming their nervous systems, getting them in a place where they can do this hard work. I invite you all to come take a look at it. It's incredible. And at the same time, there's a lot of expense that goes into even managing the upkeep of the property. You can imagine landscaping, cleanups, repairs, water, everything that goes into the cost of this, probably 2/3 of the property that's not the building. And so we've brainstormed about how can we have other income streams to help us do this work and pay our therapists a good living wage and help these people that are coming in with the most difficult circumstances they've faced in their lives. And one idea actually came from some of the clients. It's like, you should have events out there. It's so beautiful, right? And so we just started investigating that possibility. And I appreciate and understand the comments that have been made by some of the community members, and also the requirements of the city people who need to consider future uses and consider, mitigating any concerns they can imagine the property having, understandably so. At the same time, we had the same ideas. So, for example, it was have the speakers face east, away from the few neighbors that are down below us. The escarpment, the Wasatch Fall, is the west side of our property. We're 50 feet above everybody, so there's some soundproofing in that. We are just loaded with trees and natural vegetation and soft dirt that actually research shows abates sound by 50%. So there's a lot of natural resources and considerations we're putting into what seems to be a primary concern of the neighbors there is sound, concerned about sound. And so I get it, I understand it. And at the same time, it's also a business proposition. How do we make ends meet? When we're a little business, first-time business owner for me, trying to figure out how to make this work. And for example, as I brainstorm about options, if this is not approved and we can't use the land to produce an income, I see a future scenario of a developer or somebody buying it for mixed use and taking out the trees and the foliage and building a nice big 4-story apartment complex. It would change the landscape literally. And I don't want that. I want to continue with the service we provide first and foremost, but also the beauty that unique one-of-a-kind property has. And an urban center like Millcreek, and really in probably the Salt Lake Valley, I don't know anything that's like this. It's incredible. It's special. And I'm doing what I can to preserve this. This isn't a money-making venue, so we're talking about mild weather, spring and fall, weekends, Friday, Saturday. And we're thinking if we're really successful, we're thinking 30, maybe 40 days a year. Out of 365, we're talking 10 days, 10% of a year that we'd be operating. And I'm completely open to conditional use, being considerate of our neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. We want to understand and respond to those requests and those the need for conditions around it and future development, all those things. So I see it as doable. I'm excited about it. I think it's a way to make our business viable. As a small business owner, as a first-time business owner, and a beautiful property that's unique to the valley is important. And just as a final comment, when you think about the work we do, as I said, people come in our doors for the most difficult experiences they've had in their life, the hardest. And I hope that you can accommodate this plan, because now we could invite people into our property where they can celebrate the most joyful events that they can have in their life. What a great circle of life that we could provide here. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there questions from the commission for staff or the applicant?
I have one. Brad, is there, within a development agreement that might be tied to a rezone, could you place restrictions on the hours of operation of some potential event center?
Yeah, well, so development agreements are generally for development. They tend to have an expiration, whereas a conditional use could run with the land, with the, regardless of who the owner is, it doesn't run with the applicant. In this case, this kind of tip, maybe I don't know if I fully answered your question, but I want to add to it. In this case, we're just speaking to a rezone on this because there is no development with a zone condition attached to it to make sure or ensure the property still stays as a buffer. I want to certainly get into the details of what Sasha was talking about with the reception center and some of those things with another application that's on the heels of this one. So for that reason, I mean, could it, to answer your question, as be included part of a development agreement? I suppose so, but We didn't really have a development per se that was being proposed at this point.
But you mentioned that through the conditional use process, there would be another way to maybe ask for some of these
Yeah,
restrictions?
so I was going to speak more to this on the next application, but a conditional use would go on a case by case, and you would condition a specific business based on, well, a number of things. You'd have to identify certain impacts that were detrimental, that are above and beyond what would normally otherwise be allowed.
Right.
So if a gas station's allowed, for example, and someone wanted to do a car wash in addition to that, maybe was a conditional use, you would condition the car wash. Or, you know, if you can imagine a box of what you could put in it, anything above that rim would be what you would condition. And so, but those conditional uses are a tool that can be used in zoning to mitigate certain additional impacts from a certain use or what have you.
Thank you.
And Brad, hey, I'm sorry, I might have missed it. You said that they couldn't do them outside, or this would make it so they could do it.
So this is just a rezone, right? So if the property is rezoned commercial, it would be allowed. So a reception center's already allowed in the commercial zone as
Right.
is. So if you approve the zone, that use would inherently be allowed
As a permitted use, not a
as a
conditional
permitted use. Now, as a permitted use with the caveat that their outdoor is not allowed within 300 feet of a residential zone boundary. This property is only, I think, 200 feet deep at the deepest. It might not even be that.
Under a
So you'd have to
conditional
be-
use, is it allowed?
It's not even allowed as a condition. It's, no, it's, well, it's, let me just make sure I'm clear on this. You can do an indoor reception center, event center. We don't really care because most of that impact that would be generated from an indoor is indoor. It's sort of encased or is controlled. If you're going to do an outdoor venue, for example, you've got to be further than 300 feet away from a residential property line. And that's because we don't want to have speakers and lights and people dancing, partying, do whatever they do at a wedding reception or a funeral or a bar mitzvah or whatever it is, right up next to the property line, because that does have impact.
So the applicant's not asking for an outdoor use.
They're not. On the next application that's following this, they're asking that the code be changed to allow for an outdoor reception center to be allowed in the commercial zone within no distance from the property line.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right,
So this is a two-part thing.
sort of. We'll open up the public hearing for this application, and like Brad mentioned, we will be considering the textual changes that might allow for outdoor events in the application immediately after this, but because these are two different types of applications, they're separated. However, if you are here to speak specifically to the rezone for this parcel or in regards to the text change, you can come up and offer your public comment at this time. Please just step forward to the mic and state your name.
Good evening. My name is Pace Meesum, and my family owns two of these properties that directly abut this property. They're the two, I don't point them out exactly, but in any case, I just wanted to share a few concerns from ourselves, some of our neighbors who weren't able to be here tonight, and just talk a little bit about this property and what it's like and what our experience has been with it. We've been there almost 15 years and have remodeled 2 homes right there. And really the reason that we first decided to buy there, invest there, and start this project was not because of the homes, but it was because of the lots that they sit on, and now the hill that's been described. And you can see in the map, it runs north-south for quite a way. It really is a bit of a natural green belt in the city because of the fault line. It's forested, it's quiet, it's a haven for a lot of wildlife. We have deer, we have raccoons, we have foxes, we have owls. It's really a kind of a quiet forested sanctuary, but it's in, you know, a couple minutes of all of this, so it's really nice. And so yeah, this is directly in you know, my backyard. Actually, I look right up at it. And I think our concerns with the outdoor event center are not, in this case, hypothetical. Several of these events have been held over the past year, I imagine, as test cases, which I'm understanding was probably not permitted to do, but we can very much hear it. So DJ music, lights, people making merry up there into the late hours. And so, yeah, I guess I don't have specific concerns about the zoning change, but as far as having, you know, events going late into the night, and we're not really something that we can support. So that was the comment that I had for you.
Great, thank you. Any additional comments?
Hi, thanks, Christian. And thanks, Commissioners, for continuing to, I'm Jamie Allen from East Millcreek Community Council. So thanks for continuing to welcome our recommendations. I hope you could see from our letter that we tried to view this issue as sensibly and as sensitively as we could. It goes without saying that our community council values the services Woodhaven provides, and our desire is for them to maintain a successful business. However, of all the common detrimental effects on a residential zone, unwanted sound is perhaps the most intrusive and troublesome. First, it has no respect for property lines. And second, because it exists in time and not space, violations of sound ordinances are difficult to enforce. The most effective way to mitigate those effects is to aim in the direction of prevention. Of course, one's aim is not always perfect. As you know, prior to being enacted last April, the updated code went through a 2-year stakeholder input process. The result of that process relative to this case was the prohibition of an outdoor reception center use within 300 feet of a residential zone. The reason it's 300 feet and not 0 feet on one hand or 600 feet on the other is because of an express or implied negotiation between the conflicting interests of representative stakeholders. Residential zones are facing increasing pressure on any serenity their neighborhoods may offer. For many, many existing residents, upzoning, increased density, increased traffic, etc., and the resultant increased sound levels in close proximity to and within neighborhoods can contribute to higher anxiety levels, and for some to a declining sense of well-being. In the case of these specific applications, the opinion of our community council is that the existing relevant code provisions achieve an important, if imperfect, equilibrium, already address the issue in a reasonable and adequate manner, and should remain in place. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Dorothy Bice. I'm the neighbor that's just below their property. So first of all, I can say your aerial view shows the top of the trees. There's a lot of foliage and everything. I'm below them. I can clearly see everything. They can see me and everything I'm doing. There's no privacy. So if they do have the outdoor venue, I've got 150 people. Well, that's what they said as a suggestion. 150 people watching whatever I would want to do in the backyard. There is not a fence because it is, as the kind of neighborhood has kept it open for the natural wildlife. So you're talking about 150 people. There would be no privacy. In addition to that, in the parties that she has had, and there's only been 2, I've had people just wandering, trespassing over and onto my property. And I've been through it with Kathy, that, get off my land. And she did back off, but then the very next year, everything was right back where she wanted it. It's an ongoing issue where she just pushes the envelope one more. So my concern with this is that it's going to be an ongoing issue where she'll push it and push it and push it. That goes with the outdoor, with the noise, with the amount of people. So that's my biggest concern, is that I would lose all my privacy. In addition to that, this outdoor venue actually goes past the property line on one side, and I did send pictures. It goes past the property line. So that's just another way she's pushing things. And next, the bottom portion, the west side of this outdoor venue, there's a walking path, and that goes maybe 6 or 8 feet from the property line. So you don't have 300 feet on one side, and you've got maybe 6 or 8 feet on the bottom, and that goes into my property. So that would be the other concern. I did a rough measurement from the pavilion to my actual home, and it's only maybe 200 feet. So you don't have any, there's no 300 feet between the residential and the commercial. You go right to 200. So those are my concerns. So thank you for taking my time.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Hi, I am Dan Slaughter, representing Canyon View Credit Union. Not here to offer objection and or support necessarily, just thought comments. I understand it's a rare property. All the frontage is on Luck Lane, which is all commercially accessed right now. But I understand that all the rear property lines are to residential. So it is an odd kind of setup there. The concern that we have potentially is future use for our property, being that we're a commercial building. If we were ever to sell that property, if that were to be a commercial use, how would that affect our sales? So the other comment that I have is, if there were 100 people there, where would the parking be?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, are there any comments online? Okay, we'll close the public comment for this application, bring it back to the commission, and again, we've got 2 issues here. Let's bracket everything we've heard about outdoor events and save that for the text change that is coming immediately after this. For now, the only thing up for discussion and a motion is the rezone of this parcel. If you could put that back up, there we go. And just to start it off, to Brad's point, I do think a rezone for this parcel is in order here. It's very, very unusual to have a single parcel in 3 different zones. And I'm very familiar with this cul-de-sac as well. I personally do think that commercial or RM are the best zones for this. I don't think that this parcel is ever again going to be integrated to the single family neighborhood 1 zone below it, both because of the escarpment and its access from Luck Lane. So my 2 cents, I do think that a rezone for this to the commercial is in order.
What's the one directly above it again? That's commercial.
The Home
Or
Depot?
no, the RM. Oh,
RM,
there it
that's
is.
the
Yeah,
credit
RM,
union.
sorry. Yeah.
That's the credit union. And I do also support the zone condition that staff has recommended, limiting it to low or medium impact commercial uses like medical, dental, general office, et cetera. These are, this would provide a buffer, not an extentment of the high impact commercial use like you see at the Home Depot, but would require that the uses be more in harmony with the single family neighborhood below. So I am in support. Commissioners, thoughts?
I agree with, I think it's an opportunity to clean up this parcel, so we should take advantage of that. And like staff has mentioned, it's separated enough, in my opinion, from the neighborhood below that it can, I think, safely be considered commercial, even though in the future land use map it is designated as neighborhood 1.
All right. If there are no more comments, do we have a motion?
I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval to the City Council pertaining to proposed, oh no, this is not the proposed text amendment, excuse me.
Oh, I probably did get the wrong one in there. I wonder if I've got them backwards. When you get to the text amendment, it might read the opposite. I think it's ZT 25. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, no, this is right. This is
No,
right.
this is right.
It's not text amendment. Sorry, you're right. This is the rezone. I was doing these at the same time. I'm a little bit tired. Sorry. It is
Yeah.
is a rezone, not text amendment, but that is the right file number.
Okay.
And then if you'll add the zone condition as well.
Okay.
Well, I shouldn't tell you what to do. However you feel. I can read that zone condition for you again.
He's got it. I
Yeah. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval to the City Council pertaining to the proposed rezone of application ZM-26-006 as proposed, which includes a zone condition that the use of the property is limited to medical, dental, and general office, personal services, financial institutions, and reception and event centers.
I'll second that. Let's do a voice vote for this one. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed?
I think Victoria's still
Commissioner
online, right?
Reed? That is passed unanimously. And we will move on to the much discussed text changes.
Do you want me to jump right into it?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is the way the current code reads. This will answer, I think, some of the questions that were brought up. As highlighted, reception event centers are allowed as a permitted use, and then this is kind of what's prohibited on the right side. It says outdoor use is prohibited within 300 feet of a residential use or residential zone boundary, period. So that's the way the code reads right now. The applicant's proposing this, that outdoor reception centers, and this is at some direction with staff, be allowed as a conditional use, and added that they're only permitted or allowed as an accessory use to a legally established office retail use. And then there's some additional restrictions that would go forward that are as follows. Some of those site standards would include the outdoor reception centers meet these standards. There's some hours of operation, 7 to 11, limited to 150 participants. Some stuff about lighting and speakers need to be faced away from abutting residential uses. And then noise shall be limited to certain standards based on a certain study. There's also a definition that's being modified that would read like this. A commercial or nonprofit facility, primarily outdoors, that can be rented to accommodate of groups of people for celebration of life, conferences, weddings, receptions, birthdays, and similar small-scale non-disruptive activities. Facilities may include landscape gathering, outdoor seating, temporary shade structures, and accessory indoor spaces such as restrooms or reception centers. Sorry, I can't read the flags in my way. Or, oh, thanks. Outdoor reception centers are not allowed within 100 feet of residential zones. Outdoor reception centers must have significant foliage or sound mitigation materials or structures between reception areas. And any homes, outdoor reception centers must abide by noise ordinances and keep lighting to a minimum as possible. So that's a kind of a lengthy definition there of what would go in as part of this text amendment. Let me just kind of, before I get into these conclusions, or as part of these conclusions, commissioners and for those present, when the applicant brought this to staff initially, we expressed some fundamental, deep concerns with this, and I'm kind of lacing some of my personal opinions with this. The birth of zoning generally was due to certain uses being placed next to incompatible uses, and I'm talking hundreds of years ago. The best way to mitigate that is to separate them. Sometimes you get two uses that two gorillas in the same room, or maybe one's dominant, one's not. And the best thing is just to keep them arm's length or a certain distance apart. And that's the way our code, just echoing what Mr. Allen mentioned earlier, that's the way our code is drafted. That's the reason why it reads the way it does. With that 300-foot separation for outdoor uses and then allowing reception event centers as an indoor use in the commercial zone, that's the best way that we can find. And we went through this lengthy process, as mentioned, in 2025, just not even a year ago, and really had a lot of input on a lot of different things, this being one of them. We're sensitive to businesses. We want businesses to thrive. We want them to be successful. We want them to expand, and all the above. But we're highly sensitive to other surrounding uses that are adjacent and nearby and abutting that could highly be impacted by this. And so what we did, some of you might have been present with this, I don't recall, but we took the idea, the applicant and staff, to the city council, not as a decision or anything, just kind of, is this something you would consider? And of course, in that setting, there's not a lot of information. They're just saying, staff, can you find a way to see if you can make a compromise in a way to allow a business like what you have before us to be able to thrive and be able to expand and to have uses like this, but also mitigate impact to surrounding neighborhoods? The best thing we could come up with as staff is to make an accessory to office and retail uses. So it's not a primary use. There's got to be another use on the property, and this would be accessory to that. And then make it a conditional use, and that allows us to mitigate foreseeable impacts the best we can on a case by case, and then kind of modify the definition and then implement certain design standards like I read earlier. That's the best thing we can come up with, staff. I don't know that it's still there. I can't guarantee, unless I'm employed by each vendor citywide, because this applies not just to this property. This proposal would apply to any commercial property that's abutting residential zones. Unless a staff member is employed to be there on evenings and weekends and whatever to ensure that a use is complying with certain things, I can't guarantee necessarily that they'll be completely in compliance and the impacts are completely mitigated. And so the reason why I say that is because that's why we have our code written the way it is today. So I just want to kind of throw that in there. And I don't need to go over these reception center, all these conclusions, but I just want you to be aware of the reasons why our code is written how it is. If you are going to allow this, a conditional use probably is the best way to do it.
All right, thank you. And just a question for staff. We've got two applications here, two different file numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay for us to consider this public hearing, do a motion for this one, and then go into the next
Yes.
sexual amendment? Okay. So are you done, Brad?
Yes, I hope so.
All
Unless
right.
you have questions for me.
Let's, do we have questions for Brad on this specific file number 26-001? All right. Now pertaining to this specific file number, I know we've already heard from most of the public, but I need to open the public comment for this as well, if there's any. And with that, I will close the public comment for ZT 26-001 and bring it back to the commission for discussion and a vote.
I'm sorry, did that include me making a comment? I just had something I wanted to give.
I'll reopen the public comment for ZT 26-001 and you can come forward.
While Kathy's distributing those, I'd just like to make a couple comments. My name's Madeline Tate. I'm actually the applicant for all intents and purposes. I'd just like to emphasize the uniqueness of the property and some of our intentions. We do not intend to have events with 150 people. It's been unanimously agreed upon with us that the limit's 100 people. That's plenty of people in a relatively small area. We only have 2 bathrooms. And we're really looking to bring this event center to Millcreek because there is one event center in Millcreek currently, and it's upstairs. And we'd be looking to bring discounts to Millcreek residents, filling a gap. Cactus and Tropicals is technically located in Salt Lake City. Carmel Event Center is located in Holiday. And I don't want to minimize any concerns that neighbors have brought forward. I absolutely hear those. But our intention is not to be a raucous party venue burning the midnight oil. We really want to focus on being a boutique, small-scale venue for weddings, for corporate retreats. And yes, weddings will have noise that will be minimized wherever possible. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that.
Thank you.
And what Kathy just handed out is just a local venue comparison, comparing Woodhaven to Carmel, to Meet Me on 33rd, Cactus and Tropicals, Grandview. And I think this really highlights how minimal our impact would be. Would only be open for a small portion of the year, and I understand that's still significant to neighbors. But other comparable event venues are open for significantly larger portions of the year.
All right, thank you. Any further public comment?
Okay, they're in this it's a business. It's not a charity. They're in it to make money, whether it's 6 months or 8 months or years down the line. They're in it to make money. It's my home. It's our homes. It's where we live. I've been here for 25 or 26 years, so I'm staying. And it's a long-term commitment for me. They're going to be in business for what, maybe another 20 years? I don't know how old Kathy is. I don't know if she's going to be a generational thing. But it's my home. And I object. I've made everybody very clear on that. I object.
Could you state your name again?
Dorothy Bice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything online? All right, I'll close the public comment again for ZT 26001.
This is actually 25-006. This component.
Oh, okay, got my file numbers mixed up. Right. And bring it back for a discussion and a motion. And specifically for this text amendment, 25-006, not the rest of the text changes, okay? We'll go over those after this. Well, I'll start off. I do have to say, although I thought the rezone makes sense, this is the hardest one this week for me personally. And my reasoning is that it will apply to the whole city. I am not necessarily comfortable with removing the 300-foot limitation. And we have, like Brad mentioned, gone through an arduous process of revising the code and permitted and conditional uses, and just finished that up through a lot of public engagement and consultation. I'd like to hear what each of the commissioners here think about allowing outdoor reception center as a permitted use or as a conditional use, specifically on those points. It will apply to the whole city, not just this one parcel. It will, as presented, remove the 300-foot limit. And another issue that was raised was the potential impact it will have on staff and monitoring and making sure conditions are met. So at the moment, I'm not sure I can support this, but I'd like to hear what the commission thinks. Anyone?
I feel the same way about the 300 feet. That is concerning. I don't feel like I can support it at this point.
Yeah, I'm fairly sensitive to sound myself, so I certainly understand the concerns there. And as someone who does live somewhat close to some commercial properties, that is also concerning to think that that could be in my future. So I think as it stands right now, I don't think I can support it either.
Commissioner Anderson, Commissioner Wright, Commissioner Reed.
I just, I mean, I agree that in the sound and to be that close and that. However, I guess as part of the conditional use, though, are the conditions that they're proposing here of only operating 2 days a week, 5 months a year, would that be part of the conditions that are in here? And that's a little different if there's only allowed 2 events a week. You know, then I can see I could be more favorable for it. If that is actual condition that would be imposed on this property.
What concerns me from those limits is that events can go until 11 p.m., which in my opinion is a little late to be that close to residential properties. If it was something like 7 or 8, I would be more open to it. But as it stands right now, that's too late for me personally.
About 10 p.m.
Well, and that also puts an interesting situation on the individuals who own the properties, because then what do they have to schedule their social ability on their own private property to accommodate a
I'm just
business,
saying that's what
for
they're
2 days a week?
proposing, though.
Right, but like those 2 days, I mean, right now, I mean, that's something that they don't have to be concerned about. But then that would be an additional burden on top of people who live there and are making a life there to accommodate their social schedules around a business that we're permitting. And then also, I have a big problem with allowing this one with so much residential resistance against it, and 2, that would expand into the entire city as a whole. And so I think certainly not on this.
All right, Victoria, Commissioner Reed, do you have any input on this one?
I worry about the additional burden that would put on to staff and city to ensure that those are being enforced.
Yeah, that's why I don't think it would be much of a burden, because it is, for staff, the complaints come from the neighbors, and that's what triggers, investigation into it. Staff, we'd never go and sit there and monitor it all the time. You'd only monitor it or look at it when you get the complaints. But I only bring it up because they are proposing that it only be open 2 days a week, 5 months a year. And I know that's hard to put those restrictions sometimes, but that seems like what they're putting on themselves. And if we did it, and if you cut it back to 10 o'clock at night, I mean, you have certain, already there's a zone or noise ordinance that, I don't know, usually it goes to a 10 or 11. I don't know when things have to be quieted down. But on the other hand, we have rezoned it to, or at least recommended it be rezoned to commercial, and it still gives them a lot of different opportunities to do something there with it.
Yeah, my fundamental objections are removing the restrictions from 300 to 100, I believe it was, or was that zeroed out?
So you're asking to remove the 300-foot distance requirement?
Yeah, was that changed from 300 to 100, or was that zeroed out?
It's zeroed out. It's just to allow outdoor event centers as a conditional use, period.
And also to open the door to the whole rest of the city at the behest of one business. I could see this potentially working, but I don't think it's there yet.
So I'm not trying to sway or belay this any longer. And we're not talking specifically conditions, right? Because an applicant would come back and ask specific conditions, depending on where they're located in the city and whatever the circumstances are. But is there, just for the record and for the city council, as they'd be hearing your recommendation in weeks to come, are there any standards? I can't get my clicker to go back. Would there be any standards that you would feel comfortable with? And the answer may simply be no. But are there any other standards that you would recommend or that you can think of that we haven't thought of that you might consider as part of your recommendation? The standards for outdoor reception centers to meet, the activities be limited from 7 a.m. to 11, no more than 150 participants. Lighting and sound speakers must face away from abutting residential uses, and noise needs to be limited to standards established by a noise study. There they are. Is there any other standards that you might help us if this does unfold, and is there a way to get there, I guess, is what I'm asking in your minds?
I think you've heard a few from us, such as the activity time frame. I think we heard 10 or 8 p.m. over here. For me, I also, again, would not change 300. I think that is a standard that needs to remain. Commissioners, are there other standards you would recommend to staff?
I don't know that I have a recommendation right now, but I agree with you, Christian. I just don't think, I think if we change it from 300 to something else, this issue is going to come up every time we deal with it. And yeah, we can maybe put some conditional in there, but I don't think people are going to be happy with that.
I also worry about the impact of the value of your home. I know that changes. That's now noise pollution. And so that can be detrimental to the value of the homes in the neighborhood.
Noise and privacy and
right, I want to sell my home, but this is happening in my backyard. That could potentially be a problem.
I certainly would think twice to buy something with a reception center in the backyard. That level.
Brad, does that help?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted that on the record.
Yeah, sorry, Brad. I don't have like a great.
I'm not
answer.
looking for
I'll
one
think about it,
necessarily,
though.
but I just want, when the council gets your recommendation, I just want.
Sure.
This is staff kind of work with the applicant is where we come up with this, but you have certainly your independent minds. I wanted to see if you had any thoughts.
Yeah, Commissioner Reed. Yeah, maybe there is a way to make it work. I don't think this is it, and I would absolutely not change the 300-foot limitation. All right. Yeah, well, I'll make this motion. I move that the Planning Commission recommend denial to the City Council pertaining to the proposed text amendment CT 25006 as proposed. We'll start.
Second.
I'll second it too, actually.
Motion by Larson, second by Richardson. Let's start down here. Commissioner Richardson?
Aye.
Commissioner Wright?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson is aye. Commissioner Anderson? Commissioner Burgess?
Aye.
Commissioner Reed? That recommendation passes unanimously. And we will move on to ZT 26001. Did I get that one right this time?
Yes.
All right, over here, Francis. Oh, sure. We're asking for a break. Sorry. Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back here at 6:56. Perfect. All right. Calling this meeting of the Planning Commission back into order. Sorry we're late. 5 minutes was not enough. Note taken for the future. All right. Back to application ZT 26-001, amending various provisions of Title 18. Francis?
Thank you. These are a series of zoning code text amendments that they're bringing forward to you. I know it was quite an omnibus packet, but I'm going to try to walk through each one of these pretty quickly, and I think they'll make sense. Brad, Sean, Carlos, feel free to step in if you have anything that would be productive. So this is the second of 3 amendment packages. The next one will address sensitive lands, probably some historic preservation stuff and other requirements in state statute. One of the things that they did, bless their hearts, is that they renumbered everything. And I mean everything. About 8 weeks after we adopted a new ordinance that hyperlinked everything. And so I need to fix that. Thanks, guys. But I do want to note that, you know, this type of thing is normal, particularly when you write a new code, but it's also in response to, you know, new circumstances that emerge. And I'll just say every one of these proposed changes has a story, right? And many of these stories involve a layer of planning and zoning work that doesn't even involve the Planning Commission, right? We do a lot of stuff that day to day, you know, 80% of our day is actually working on, you know, nonconformities and neighborhood compatibility modifications and how tall can my fence be and how many trees do I have to remove again, right? And all of these questions come up, and these code changes are an attempt to provide better answers to those questions when they come up. The fourth bullet point is something we've already dealt with, but the first item is a series of small lot reform proposals that we're bringing to you to adjust lot width, setbacks, and coverage requirements in our small lot residential zones, which are R13, R14, R15. Building height and envelopes are unchanged. And the reason why we thought to bring these to you is that, to be fair, to be clear, and to be candid, we have encouraged all sorts of developers who come to us, even developers who say, I want to build townhomes, right? And you know, we ask them all, have you thought about like some of our small lot single family zones, right? And I'm thinking about R13, R14, and R15. And the feedback we get is that the setbacks and the lot coverage make it really difficult to build a small lot detached home, not necessarily a small lot attached home. And in fact, these zones do allow for a 0 lot line on the garage side of these lots. However, we're not necessarily seeing that. And we're also not seeing an option out there, a viable option for a small lot detached home. In some cases, a home would be as little as 15 feet wide if you consider the minimum lot size and the setbacks and requirements and the setbacks that would be required. And Sean actually identified a zone where a corner lot is effectively impossible for a single family home. I think it was the R13.
Yeah, so the current standards, if you build the lot at a minimum standard, and we should make sure that our lot minimums still work, right, would require a corner side yard setback of 20 feet and a opposite side setback of 5 feet, and the lot width is 25 feet, leaving a 0% buildable area on the property. So one of the changes is to lower that a little bit, just so there's at least a feasibility that something can get built on those lots, on those corner ones, because those on a property can actually fetch a little bit more. When you have two frontages, you get kind of 2 yards and a nicer facade, but if there's literally no room to build on them, then it doesn't really make sense.
Right. So it's important to note that these zones allow for attached units, which is interesting considering it's a R1 zone. R1 meaning usually one house per lot, and legally that is the case, but these smaller units could and would read as duplexes, and that might be the only way to actually get these to work. The adjustments would make it easier to actually just build a detached home in these zones. I note that we only have a handful of R14, R13 zones in Millcreek, and they're highlighted here in red, right? So we're not, you know, opening the box very broadly here. We're just creating opportunities for you know, more single-family detached infill development in the zones that exist. And to be candid, right, if someone comes and says, you know, I want to actually consider a rezone to R13, they now have a tool to do that and build a single-family detached home, much like this. But the rezone conversation is a little bit different, right? In that case, we would look at the general plan, we would look at the compatibility of the proposal in light of surrounding neighborhoods. We would look at the at infrastructure capacity. We would look at the capacity. We would look at the option to build. We would look at owner occupancy and among other things. But I pulled this actually from a real estate listing just today. This is a home in the Daybreak area. It's on a 4,000 square foot lot. It's 40 feet wide. It's a 32-foot wide house, right? Which means that the setbacks are about 4 feet on either side. It's in Daybreak, and by the way, it is yours for the cool price of $500,000. I just illustrate that to say that you know, there is a demand for this type of housing, and for what it's worth, right? You know, Daybreak is an example of how it could fit in a broader neighborhood context. This is mere steps away from my brother's house, which is on about a 6,000 square foot lot, right? And it is possible, right, to have houses like these in Millcreek, but it's also worth mentioning what this code does, or what this proposal does, and what it doesn't do. It doesn't broadly open the box, right? It really only applies to the handful of properties that are in red here, but it would give, you know, candidly, a developer a more feasible option if they were to come in and say, you know, instead of building townhomes or duplexes, I might want to build that. I'd like to give the city the option to have this conversation, right? And that's why we're proposing our series of small lot reforms. The next item are some changes to the R2 and R4 setbacks. So we want to adjust the setbacks to encourage front doors and porches for duplexes and fourplexes that extend in front of garages. So again, the impact of this is relatively minor. It's a little bit more significant in terms of the R2 zones, but they exist already, right? And we only have a handful of R4 zones in our city. Brad, I don't know, do you want to, can you speak to this just a little bit?
Yeah, we had a scenario that I think is not terribly uncommon. Brad Reynolds Construction approached staff on a piece of property just down 13th here. It's the Bailey property. And there's two pieces. There's one on the east and one on the west side of Bailey's. He's comfortable developing the one side because it's a little bit wider, but the one on the west side of the property originally was a single family lot. It's very deep. It's very narrow, but it's very deep. So imagine an elongated property. It's maybe 60, 70 feet wide, but maybe 5 or 6 or so 100 feet deep. In order to get any kind of development on there, whether it be single family or an R2 and R4 or whatever have you, by the time you get a road down one side of that, and then you face buildings onto that road takes up 25 to 30 feet of that 70-foot wide lot. And so it gives you 40 feet, and then you do setbacks on top of that. And it just doesn't work. And so we're left with this question: if we can't do single family on it, or you can do one home, I guess, on a rather large lot, elongated lot. If not, you know, then what do we do with the property if it's to change it to, say, an R2 and R4? And so we came up with this thought, and I've had experience doing this as a former employee, again, referencing South Jordan. I'm not saying they have all the answers to everything, but we're referencing them twice tonight. What we did is we allowed if you're going to do a side-loaded garage or a rear-loaded garage or something like that, why not have the house come up a little bit, the structure come up a little bit closer to the road? And then what that does, it's not that you couldn't have a front-loaded garage, but the garage would have to be subservient, meaning it'd have to be set back, or side or rear-loaded. And then it brings the living space and the porch and what have you closer to the street. Our experience was then, and I think it's the same case today, a lot of people don't really use their front yards for a lot of things. They're there primarily for a little bit of a buffer off the street. And a lot of times they're meant for maybe a 10 or 15-foot public utility easement that might go behind the sidewalk. Other than that, allowing those buildings to come up a little bit closer gives you a little bit of a pedestrian feel on the whole street, not just the home, but eventually on the whole street. And so that was kind of the idea in saying, let's start with the R2s and the R4s, since there's so very few of those in the city now. Run this as a prototype and see how it works. To allow primarily these infill properties to develop for something other than a single home, and allow for more housing opportunities. And so that was kind of the discussion on that. And then if that's very successful, maybe over time and at some distant day, maybe it's something that could be considered on a much broader level to see how it works and how it looks within the Millcreek's setting.
Okay, I'll just add that really what this does is this does create a two-tiered front yard setback, right? So if there's a garage entrance, that setback would remain at 25 feet, but the other portions could be pushed forward. The next question, or the next issue is neighborhood compatibility modifications. So there are certain standards of the code that can be that are subject to modification based on neighborhood compatibility, and this is because over the 70 or 80 years of zoning, there have been so many different approaches to building height, setbacks, and building height, setbacks, and lot coverage, and so on. In the year or so, a year and a half that we've had this code, almost 2 years now, we've reviewed 3 neighborhood compatibility modifications, and current provisions can be difficult to read and interpret. We have removed the option for rear setback modifications because they were never asked for, and the rear setback is already narrow. So the red lines are pretty intricate, but what we're not changing is the substance of the neighborhood modification. In fact, if anything, we might be making it more difficult. For example, we're saying that you have to pick you have to pick all lots within your proximate neighborhood and take account for the characteristics of each lot, whether you like it or not. And we added some definitional language to lot coverage, for example, in the definition. And finally, we broke out what was an unfortunately complicated table, right? Really hard for us to implement in the field, and broke it out to paragraphs and a couple more simple tables that will be easier to understand. Nonconformities. So significant red lines in this area, again, really driven from the result of applications and inquiries that we received in the last year. I will say that navigating this ordinance is a lot of our day-to-day work. You'd be shocked at how many houses are non-complying or non-conforming in one way or another. And someone who wants a building permit needs to kind of resolve this process first. And so it's important to provide appropriate clarity and an explanation that will let applicant staff and in some cases the hearing officer in making determinations. So what we did was the most important aspect of this is that we distinguished between the nature of the nonconformity in terms of expansion. So if a house, for example, is nonconforming in terms of building envelope, we would treat an expansion differently than if it were nonconforming in terms of front yard setback. As the code's written today, it's all the same. And that can be pretty difficult to, fairly and adequately create a process where, someone can get a permit to expand their non-complying structure, which is something I think we would all desire, but to make sure that that's done in a way that's compatible with surrounding neighborhoods. We also added standards for change of use and termination thresholds. So just to make it clear that, if I have a non-conforming use and I change that use, then that non-conformity gets abandoned. That is a principle in case law, but it wasn't as clear as it should be in our code, so we made that clarity. We also add clarity on what happens when a non-complying structure is demolished. And under what circumstances is it demolished? Is it voluntarily demolished, or has it fallen into disrepair and is the subject of clear neglect, or was it felled by an act of God, for example? All those 3 fact cases are different, and they have different impacts on how we might respond. So we added a lot of stuff to the nonconformities ordinance. Mainly, we borrowed it extensively from Salt Lake City. And they have kind of a similar pattern and similar experience than we do. Tree preservation. So the tree preservation ordinance has been a challenge for us to implement. We have a very aggressive tree preservation ordinance in terms of the standard, but there are some significant loopholes and some significant challenges to it. One of the most important loopholes is that, you know, someone can remove all the trees from their property before they make application, and there's not a thing we can do about it, right? Because we don't have the ability to, you know, enforce trees that existed before someone made an application. This has happened before. In some cases, people were responding to a code enforcement concern, and they were being asked to clear debris, and they interpreted that as broadly as possible in an honest attempt to come into compliance. But in other cases, we believe that people have actually removed trees before they made an application so they could avoid the tree replacement process. The change in this ordinance includes a look-back provision for about a year. Sean, can you do you want to maybe explain some of this a little bit?
Yeah, so like Francis said, you know, we've seen cases where people fell a bunch of trees on the property, and then they don't have any trees to preserve, so they don't have to plant new trees when building something new. So the point of this look-back provision, we have GIS here at the city with really good satellite data that's updated every 6 to 8 months or so, where we can see when stuff has happened. This has worked and helped us with code cases where I didn't build that was here when I bought the house. You look at the satellite, you built it last year, right? So that's really helpful. And we can see that with these tree fellings that happen sometimes where I didn't have any trees on the property, but you could see there were. And so the idea of this is to use that as well as other means to kind of count those towards that preservation standard. So if you cut down a really big tree, you'd still have to replace that when you build something new. We can look back with satellite data and with you know, a licensed arborist that can go out there and say, yes, this was a healthy tree that they cut down prior to this that had a general size of X, right? How well this will work in practice is something to be tested, but the idea is more to kind of veer people away from cutting everything down so they don't have to replace it on the back end. Some of the other provisions that are changing for the tree preservation ordinance, or that we're proposing rather, kind of have to do with cases where you can't feasibly replant the amount of trees that are required. For a specific example, there's a property that needs to remove some trees to build a project there that they're allowed to do. In removing the trees that they need to, they would have to plant over 135 new trees on like a half-acre lot, which is insane. So there isn't really a way out of that besides not cutting the trees down. And while I would love to not cut down trees, we also have to find a balance here. And so what we're proposing are a few different ways to kind of relieve some of that pressure. One of which would be a tree fund or a fee in lieu. We don't have that fully set up yet, but we're putting it in now so we can kind of build towards it. The idea being, if you can't fix or refill all these trees, you can request a payment into a tree fund that the city would hold that could then get used on different projects or for people in the neighborhood that maybe want them, or you know, whatever that program looks like, as a way to still ensure that we get canopy coverage in the city without just incentivizing people to cut everything down, being stuck or things like that. But in the meantime, we also kind of put in or proposing something where you could work with another property owner and transfer that burden to them. So if you have a neighbor and they want 4 trees and you have to replace 6 trees or what have you, they could take some of that on for you, because again, the main goal is to have a sustainable tree canopy, not to maximize trees on every single lot to the biggest extent. So those are kind of the biggest changes, and adding some more pieces here and there, better definitions within the chapter, and increasing the first tree size, that if you cut something down that's less than 4 inches in caliper, currently that doesn't count. We increase that up to 6 inches just because a 4-inch caliper tree is not very tall and is not really adding to that canopy. But we also added in another category for even larger trees. You get punished even more if you cut down a 48-inch caliper tree at breast height, which is the standard. You have to replace that with many smaller trees on the property, neighboring properties, what have you.
Thank you, Sean. So I'll add just a couple notes here. we would love to actually have a real robust urban forestry program on the scale of Salt Lake City, right? But given current staff and budget constraints, that's just not possible for us, right? The Salt Lake City Corporation has a whole department that does nothing but urban forestry, both on the private side and on the public side, and we just do not have that, right? And so we have to craft a policy that is calibrated to our capacity. And we think this look-back provision plus an option to create other ways to replace trees is probably a good interim solution. Now, we are exploring a citywide tree inventory. I'm actually seeking a budget, a budget in the next year to actually do a comprehensive tree inventory to lay the foundation for a possible forestry program in the future. Something we may or may not cooperate with South Salt Lake on. They have similar challenges, and we're exploring potentially a partnership there. And at that time, right, it might make sense for us to change our approach a little bit. But in the meantime, I am a little bit concerned because I know there's a sentiment of, well, let's just use the tree preservation ordinance as a way to restrict development. It's not going to work because if you go through this process and entitle a development and entitle a subdivision and say, oh, too bad, can't get rid of those trees because you can't plant 150 of them, what that is a regulatory taking, right? And the city and the city taxpayer is liable for purchasing and condemning that land if we say that. So it's important to understand what the tree preservation ordinance is intended to do and what it's not intended to do, and it can't be written to kind of functionally put a city in the position of condemning properties that could otherwise be developed because they comply with the code. And so we're mindful of that. That's one of the reasons why we're adjusting the replacement factors, giving people options if there are some extenuating circumstances, and creating these release valves that would allow for replacement of the trees in places where they are desired, or helping to fund a city-based tree fund, which would be a nice start too. Accessory dwelling units. So one of the things we're doing here is we're changing and simplifying proof of residency requirements. The current list is both a little complicated and second, we're finding that people are, we're observing some loopholes in them, right? And so we came to the council earlier this year and created a much simplified proof of residency requirement for short-term rentals, and we're applying those same standards to accessory dwelling units to prove owner occupancy. Currently, ADUs are only allowed in the agriculture and R1 zone, and it's important to note that no other housing type can have an ADU. Definitionally, by state statute, ADUs are associated with single-family dwellings or single household dwellings. But we note that state law says that internal accessory dwelling units are allowed in any area zoned primarily for residential use, and we have a number of zones outside of ag and R1 where single-family homes are allowed, including the FRE zone, the R2 and R4 and RM zone. So what this code change will do is it will say if you have a legally established single-family dwelling or single household dwelling, is the term we use now, in any one of these zones, you can have an internal ADU, and that would bring us into compliance with what's now Chapter 10-21-303 of State Code. Commercial zone automobile standards. We're proposing some additional standards for auto-oriented businesses in our commercial zones and manufacturing as well. So we now will state as a standard of approval, or as a standard of behavior, if you will, development standard, that wrecked and inoperable vehicles and parts must be stored indoors. This will aid in ensuring code compliance. We've had code complaints, and we want to be able to respond to them in a way that's efficient. Public street or municipal utility easement vacations. So currently, a planning commission hearing is required. I don't know if you keep wanting if you keep wanting to do this. I'm happy to hear that from you. But our draft removes this requirement such that the city council would be the sole body to hear and evaluate street easement vacations. Strictly speaking, street and municipal utility easements or vacations are not required by state statute that a planning commission be be hearing these items. Our considerations as a city are good cause and adverse impacts, not necessarily any land use regulation, and it would streamline the public decision-making process. But I'll note that if the Planning Commission has strong feelings to hear street and municipal utility easement vacations, let us know. This was a change to the code that we actually made earlier this year, or last year. Previous to that, the Planning Commission didn't hear them before either. So you've actually heard one. It came to you earlier this year, but we're wondering if we want to keep doing that. And I'd be interested in your feedback on that. Almost done. We're proposing moving some of the roadway standards into Title 14. We did probably about 80% of them, but there are some remnants that were in Title 18 that we want to move over. Standards pertaining to measuring setbacks from private streets will remain in our subdivision standards chapter. The reason for this is that street requirements should all be in one location to aid applicants, staffs, and plan reviews. It's hard to look for things in two different locations. Noticing timelines, we're adjusting noticing for major and minor subdivisions to align with our other standards in the code. And the reason why is our goal now is that any item that goes before a planning commission will have a 21-day notice, no matter what. And this allows time for the public open house and for public comment by interest groups and community councils. MD open space requirements. So most of our zones have a certain percentage open space requirement. The MD zone does not. It is our highest density zone. The MD zone requires 250 square feet per unit, no matter how many units you have. Well, that square footage adds up quite a bit for a large project. And the new standard would allow for 20% minimum or 250 square feet per unit, whichever is less. The reason for this is that current standards would make larger development impractical, including affordable housing. We're working on a project on a proposal now that would benefit from this change. The new standard would align with the CCAS and commercial mixed-use standards for open space as well. And our MD zone is our highest density zone, and it is only allowed in the Meadowbrook station areas. So this impact would not only be limited to that zone, but it would also be consistent to our approach with CCAS and with the mixed-use projects in our commercial zones already. Parking standards. The only change we're making to parking standards is to make senior housing, the requirement for senior housing parking the same as general multi-household development standards. This actually came as a request from you earlier this year. So the current standards are at half a space per unit. This is probably not sufficient for an independent living senior housing concept. Although, and we note that in our code, we have other use types such as assisted living that also have reduced standards. District blade sign. So this would create the option for one district blade sign on the side of the proposed hotel mixed use site. District blade signs cannot have an electronic message center. So the site plan for the hotel shows this type of concept, and that's on the right, that Millcreek Common blade sign there. But our development agreement process doesn't allow for sign modifications, so the sign would have to be modified. We'd have to create a standard for one, and we're proposing one. And honestly, the model that or the inspiration that we're using is the Chicago Theater sign and on the Golden Mile in Chicago. So it will not be, again, I want to reiterate, it will not be an electronic message center. It will just be a placemaking element in the city center. And then height envelopes for the plan for plan unit developments. We don't do PUDs anymore, but we have a whole bunch of them. And we used to have language in our old code that would say that the height envelope is measured from the perimeter of the plan unit development, because in many cases there are, in some cases there's almost no setback between units within a PUD. And there are a lot of historical examples of this, including Cove Point in Olympus Cove is the prominent one that stands to mind. But we want to reinsert that language so it would simply establish that building envelope from the perimeters, because we don't want to find ourselves in a situation, and we've gotten pretty close to one where someone wants to rebuild a roof and they can't because theoretically the envelope would force the roof in and they've only got a 20-foot buildable site. height projections, we're adding descriptive languages and definitions around height projections in R1, R2, R4, and ag zones. This clarifies the legislative intent around building envelopes. Building envelopes exist in each of those zones, and some applicants have challenged our standards for ambiguity. So what does a chimney mean anyway, they might ask, or what is a tower? And I think it's really important to have, you know, clear legislative intent on that, and I don't want necessarily someone to build a huge tower saying it's a quote unquote chimney. So we have, you'll notice we've got slightly different standard language for parapets relative to chimneys, and, you know, any sort of architectural ornamentation just has to fall within the building height envelope, and we define that as well. Fencing, so this clarifies language on height measurements. So currently an applicant is prohibited to build a berm to increase the height of the fence, but the way the language is written is a little bit hard to enforce and a bit convoluted. So it clarifies, in this case, legislative intent around fence heights. It makes it much easier for us to enforce it. And again, some applicants have challenged our standards for ambiguity, and we work with this code constantly. How often do we get a request on fencing? Maybe once a week, at least. Clearview, here again, this is a situation of where in the process of jettisoning the old code, we threw away a couple good things. This would reinsert language from the old code to address Clearview requirements where the right-of-way may not be apparent. We have many roads in Millcreek that lack sidewalks, and it can be difficult to ascertain a right-of-way line in the absence of a survey. And this language, this old language that comes back, and you see it in the red lines, actually gives us a different distance and an option to measure that clear view distance from the edge of pavement. And we do receive a lot of complaints about clear view and an expectation to kind of clean those up. And so important clear language is helpful to us as we process those concerns from residences. That's it. So far we've received limited public comment on these proposed changes. I will say that we've gotten feedback from 2 separate community councils recommending continuation to allow them additional time to consider these changes. And I noted this, that there were significant concerns in those comments about the impact of an outdoor reception center, and you've already dealt with that. So our recommendation tonight, you have 2 options. You can continue this if you want to noodle on this some more, or you can recommend to the City Council adoption of the proposed ordinances drafted by staff with any following additional changes that you want to make after your discussion and public hearing.
And I did want to add one thing. I did speak with the chair of the Canyon Rim Citizens Association, as well as Tom Stevens on the Mount Olympus Community Council. At the time, Tom Stevens couldn't speak for the entirety of the council, but he was recommending that a continuation, and Mike Rush wanted to speak with them before making an official recommendation, but was kind of leaning that same way. And I will throw myself under the bus. They have a very short window, and this is a lot of stuff, and it's not the most thrilling read. So to be hesitant on what all of these red lines mean for their communities is very fair. So that's kind of why they have some hesitancy from my understanding, which is totally fair. But that's it.
Understood. Wonderful. That was a mouthful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to save commission questions for our discussion portion. And in so doing, I'll open the public hearing for this application, if any.
I just want, Jamie Allen, East Millcreek, I just wanted to make sure that you knew, sorry, I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
There we go.
I just wanted to make sure you knew that ours was one of the community councils also that recommended continuation.
Thank you. Anything online? No. And I do want to acknowledge those community council recommendations. I believe they were all for continuation, correct? All right, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back for questions, discussion, and a motion. I'll start off. You'll have to translate the fencing portion for me. I swear I read that, the proposed language on page 3 of the staff report 3 or 4 times. And I'm still not sure if I got it, but I do trust you guys. I just want to clarify, is this height for non-conforming modifications for fences, is this for fences that abut each other that are different heights? are these for fences of different heights in a neighborhood? What does this NCM for fences actually propose?
Yeah, so we do have a neighborhood compatibility modification option for fences. So, generally, like we've got a certain set of fence rules, like 6 feet, 6 feet tall in a front yard, for example. We have a neighborhood compatibility option for fencing now, but it was pretty thinly written. So theoretically, you could say, well, I want to have a 6-foot front yard fence because all my neighbors have 8-foot rear yard fences, right? The language didn't make any distinction between rear yard and front yard. And remember, under state statute, right, the clear, plain reading of the language usually prevails. And so I want to avoid a situation where someone's going to, take advantage of higher rear yard fences to get a fence that is taller than what the code would normally allow. So we rewrote that to actually say that you have to have, it has to be, like for like, or if you're comparing, or if you're evaluating front yard fences, you can only bring a comparative analysis of similar front yard fences into play.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. All right, and on page 5 of the staff report, you cover demolition of a nonconforming structure, and there is the destruction of a nonconforming use by wind, fire, earthquake, act of God, etc. Is destruction of a nonconforming structure by wind, fire, earthquake, act of God, is that covered elsewhere, or is that omitted?
Well, no. So there are two concepts here, right? One is the destruction of a non-complying structure, and the other is the destruction of a structure housing a non-conforming use, right? Slightly. I mean, it's a narrow distinction, but it is an important one because it has to do with timing. But we do have a definition of, I think we have so if you go onto page 56 or 57 of the ordinance, it says, if a structure that contains a nonconforming use is damaged by wind, fire, earthquake, or other calamity or act of God or the public enemy, and the structure of use has not been abandoned, which means that you've responded to it within a year, the nonconforming use may be resumed and the structure may be restored to the condition prior to the destruction, so long as a building permit is obtained within 6 months, and a certificate of occupancy is issued for final inspection completed within 2 years of receipt of a building permit. So there are multiple thresholds that you have to get. First, you have to show that you didn't intend to abandon it. Second, you have to get a building permit within 6 months. Third, you have to complete it within 2 years of getting a building permit. These thresholds are here to give builders time to deal with the misfortune of insurance and fire inspections and the like.
Right. So just to clarify again, I understood that the voluntary demolition of a non-conforming structure had to be rebuilt as a conforming structure.
Correct. So, I mean,
But
if I willfully tear it down, I have to build it in compliance.
But destruction by the act of God does not need to
Correct.
be built back at a compliant.
Correct.
Okay. All right. My next question is from the fee in lieu. The way I read it here, and I wonder if I'm correct, is it would the fee in lieu for tree replacement, would this hypothetically permit someone to cut down all their trees and then pay that fee for all their trees and therefore maybe not even replace any trees on their property, or do our landscaping standards prevent that?
The landscaping standards require some trees no matter what, but the fee in lieu there's a two-part to it. One, we don't have, it's just set up now, just the language. It wouldn't be usable yet until we actually have a full system set up. But it's also something that has to be approved by staff and the planning director. So you come in and say, oh, I'm going to cut them all down. No.
You're probably not going to approve
No,
that.
but I can't get all of these on here. If I get 3 out, these 3 I can't make fit. Okay, that's the case. So the idea is just to kind of allow some reduction when necessary, but yeah, not to cut everything and then just pay for that.
Gotcha. I understood that was the intent. I wanted to make sure that that hypothetical scenario had been considered. And last but not least, is the street easement vacation that we heard this year, was that the Garf property?
That was one of them.
That was
That
one
was-
of them.
I think you might have heard two, but that was, well, you've heard a couple in the last few years. Yeah, the issue with those is previously, before we adopted our code, is they went straight to city council, and when we adopted our code, we said, hey, might be a good idea to have the planning commission take a look at these too. And the state code still reads the way it reads, and we found that maybe it's not necessarily bring them to you. It's sort of a redundant. I mean, you kind of say there's only two criteria really for vacating a right of way or a public easement, and as if there's good cause and doesn't materially injure any of the adjacent property owners that access it. So there's really not a whole lot to review in that sense. We thought, well, let's just simplify it and streamline it and just run it straight to city council.
Understood. And I'll completely defer to the city council's decision on this, but if the Garf property was an example of that, I thought that was very conducive to public engagement. I got a lot of comments on that, a lot of questions about it. Those were some of the most memorable and productive applications I recall. I did really enjoy those engagements. So personally, I am in support of the Plan Commission continuing to hear that, but again, I'll defer to the city council on that.
Okay.
Those were all my questions. All right, commissioners, have at it. Sorry. Did I ask all of our questions for all of us? Go for it.
Yeah, that's a hard one, and it's not. I don't want to disparage developers, but people will find ways through code to get around some requirements. That kind of sounds like that's what that is. I don't know if this necessarily would fix that. However, like Francis said, we are trying to do a tree inventory study and get a little bit more data on where trees are and where there's more needed, which could then lead to a more robust section here of tree preservation and tree enforcement, right? And that could be enforcement that people are taking care of them properly, and a more robust removal permitting system, because we don't really have that at the moment. That's all I can think of off the top of my head, but it's something we need to consider.
I think maybe we could consider adding language that talks about trees that are lost during the course of a development. And I think what we do is we have them amend the tree plan, right? Recalculate it, and then at that point they could replant trees on their site. They can do some off-site improvements. They can pay into the tree fund. I think we can probably add some language to that. Obviously, right? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Didn't mean. Right. I can imagine how that sounds. And I think Sean can too. He was nodding his head. The other thing, I mean, obviously, like if I had the power to bond on private property, that would solve this problem right away, right? But the state doesn't give me it doesn't give us that ability. We used to have that ability, but that's gone now. So I'm sorry. Yeah, we can only bond for improvements in the public realm, and so in the right of way. So if they were, for example, to plant a tree in the right of way, we could bond for that, but we could not bond for the preservation of a tree. And if we could, we probably wouldn't be having any of these problems. Okay. Thank you. I think that's a good suggestion. Thank you. Okay.
All right, commissioners.
I agree with Commissioner Reed. I saw similar situation at the townhome development on 5th East and 45th South. Some of those trees died during development. So I'm happy that Commissioner Reed brought that up. And I also agree that I don't have a strong opinion on whether or not vacancies of easements come to this body. But I think I would, in respect to the community council's push for continuance.
All right. Anything on this side? I do just want to say for the record, I'm very supportive of the small lot reform changes we've made here. Also of the setback changes for R2 and R4 zones. The changes to better enable neighborhood compatibility modifications for expansions and the look back provision for tree preservation. I just want to get that on the record. Those are really good things. We've heard from Commissioner Richardson about continuation. How does the rest of the commission feel? Would you move this forward or prefer to continue it? All right. I'm hearing a lot of agreement with the community councils for a continuation. So do we have a motion?
I motion to continue to the next planning commission meeting for additional consideration.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Wright and a second by Richardson. Let's do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Any opposed? None. That passes unanimously as a continuation. Okay. Carlos, you are up next. Thank you for being patient. We are up for CUP 26003 and SD 26002, request for a conditional use permit and major subdivision at 3347 South 900 East.
Right. Yeah, we have a conditional use permit and a major subdivision application at 3347 South 900 East to accommodate 17 townhome units with 1,500 square feet of commercial space in the form of live-work units with the intention for owner occupancy. This is, again, about 300 feet south of the intersection between 3300 South and 900 East. You have an array of, you have an array of commercial businesses, all northeast, residential multifamily to the south, and a single-family lot to the east of this property, with a future land use of neighborhood 1. Now, we're not doing a rezone. However, again, this just speaks a little bit of our efforts on 900 East to re-identify some of the potential future uses as applicants come in analyze the potential developments, particularly in corners. And so, again, neighborhood one, I just wanted to mention it. Neighborhood one, again, typically our lowest density. However, this is a commercial zone that does allow for residential multifamily, given that there is some sort of commercial component to the to the project. This is just again a site plan of what that what the proposal is. This is a lot that is 0.79 acres, so it's about 34,500 square feet. The density that was used for this proposal is that, again, in our commercial zone, we allow for a density of 2,000 square feet per dwelling unit for multiple household dwellings, which typically means 5 or more. Again, due to this property being approximately 35,000 square feet, the calculation came out to about 17 units on this lot. Again, that is just the base density. Typically, applicants will, find a way to actually be able to fill that amount of density as they face, land use consumption in terms of your open space and your drive, your setbacks, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, they were able to push as much as 17 units in this proposal. Those 17 units are broken down on 3 buildings. You have building 1 and building 2 that are composed of 6 buildings, and then you have building 5 that is composed of 5 buildings. They will not be any higher than 35 feet in height. The commercial zone actually allows you to build all the way up to 45, but because this is less than 100 feet from a residential single-family property, we were able to cap the height at 35, which will be the maximum allowed on this property anyways. Some of these buildings are also about a little bit above 100 feet on length. We have 134 on building 1 and 2 and 105 on the 3rd building. So these are some of the floor plans. We basically have we have 3 different units. They all are 4 bedrooms, about 3 floors. Basically, that additional 4th room would be located in the 1st floor by the garage, kind of as a flex space. But we will be considering this as 4-unit townhomes. This is type floor A, which is the units that are internally on building 1 and building 3, which is again the 2 of the 6 unit buildings. Then there's type B, which is the actual live work. And these are the ones that introduce the commercial space while also fronting 900 East, which is one of our requirements in this zone, to be able to have at least 50% of this frontage be covered by commercial. Live work qualifies for that for that provision in our code. And so some of the requirements for this live work are that they have to be at least 12 feet in height. They have to be at least 12 feet in length. Again, there needs to be at least 1,500 square feet of total commercial space in the property, as well as, again, the 50% of frontage of whatever street or whatever faces a street. It also finished floor may not be lower or higher than 2 feet from a street elevation. Again, all of these components to add a dimension of commercial in what essentially is a mixed-use project. Not to mention that we also typically ask for about 50% of glassing on the 1st floor of a street-facing facade on a building. This is about just little of above 50%. So currently meeting our standards. This is the other type of unit, type D, which is basically the units that will be abutting or abutting the back rear property, significantly smaller. However, they are still able to provide 4 units. This is basically how it would look from the from 900 East. This is your front-facing facade. This will be your rear-facing facade, which will be facing the single-family residential neighbor. This is basically the look that will be facing north and south, basically your outside yards. And this is obviously the inner side, as you know, garages connecting with the drive aisle that is present there. This is just a subdivision plat showcasing that they indeed are applying for owner occupancy. Basically, that's the gist of the proposal itself. This is just a little bit of what the landscape would look like with our Type A landscape buffer, which is prescribed in our landscaping code. As far as open space actually goes, typically we have a 30-20% open space requirement that we typically apply on RMs, MDs, etc. You know, the areas that call for multifamily. Well, the commercial zone actually allows you also to provide just a certain amount of private and public open space, which is to be clarified actually on the plat. Those are the things that we typically like to record. The limits are about 100 feet or 100 square feet of private space. No, 150 feet of private space, and then 100 that will be shared per unit as common space. And so that is currently present in the project. And the reason why I'm also sort of showcasing sort of these landscaping plans is just due to some of the public output that we had as we were running through this cycle of meetings. We had an open house meeting not too long ago, April 7th. The neighbors that were actually commenting were just here. They just left. But they raised a couple of issues, particularly because they are the neighbors of the residential single family. And so we have an instance where, if you remember how the site plan would be, we will have buildings, we will have a building basically facing what essentially is a single family residential, right? There will be some balconies that are likely going to be on a second floor. And so you're talking about, you know, 10 feet above finished grade, and that will obviously be overlooking the residential neighborhood. The only provision that we truthfully have in our code that prohibits this relationship between balconies overlooking a different property is that you don't necessarily have to build a balcony, but you could potentially build a patio with a minimum of 60 square feet and a minimum of 5 foot of that. So what I mean with this is that I wouldn't be able to necessarily subject them to get rid of balconies as per this privacy issue. We do typically have provisions for terraces and rooftops, but not necessarily for balconies. And so we could screen with landscaping. Currently, the landscaping buffer type A includes 2 trees that I believe should be above 20 feet, and then different smaller canopy that would need to be at least 6 feet. For the sake of the screening of this property, and I don't necessarily think that it should be a condition, but it could be a condition if decided upon it. But we essentially could require or put a condition to add additional taller trees that will actually cover that 10-foot threshold between the of height of those balconies. Currently, right now, we're only really screening about 2 of those 5 units. And so again, we can always ask nicely, but we can always put it as a condition. It'll be up to you to decide whether that is the good route on this application, as it is a certain detrimental effect needed to be mitigated, right? Some of the other potential detrimental effects are obviously increased traffic on 900 East. We're introducing 17 units in what would have been 1. Again, this is about 300 feet from the intersection. This is about 120 feet away from when this street actually splits from one lane into the right and the left and the turning lanes. And so there definitely has been a comment from the neighbors that perhaps the right turning lane may be make just congest, right? If you take about that distance, which is 150 to 100, you may fit maybe 9-10 cars. And so now you're speaking about if there was ever a time that, I don't know, 12 cars are stacked up, again, it may cause just some unpleasant experience for the neighbors in this street. And so again, this is just something that was brought up again also on that open house meeting. Another issue or that some neighbors were voicing is potential parking on 900 East, which again could also disturb traffic, could also disturb just those turning lanes, as well as there could be the possibility of parking in the nearby streets, right, such as 3370, 3375, even at Rancho Market. And so again, there's a certain concern for the parking within and outside of this proposal, which reminds me that I did not run on traffic. I did not tell you what the parking specs are. And so basically, we will have 2-car garages for these units. So there will be a total of 34 stalls for just the residential. Again, they will all be contained within the garage. Typically, when we have units above 3 bedrooms, we keep a standard 2-car garage or 2-car parking requirement. And so that will meet that despite being 4 bedrooms. And then they will need to provide about 8 stalls between the guest parking and the commercial aspect. So for the commercial, they are providing about 1,500 square feet of commercial. The allowed uses would have typically been professional or office uses, which they ratio to about 400 or 1 stall per 400 square feet. So you may take that calculation as, the 3.75 that will be needed for the commercial. The ratio for the guest parking, it's 0.25, which with this amount of units will come out a little bit over 4. And so when we combine both ratios, we came out with 8 stalls, which are currently provided. And so that's the gist of the proposal. Again, a lot of these issues root from potential traffic on 900 East, potential parking on 900 East, whether there is a reason to impose a certain condition in regards to traffic. I know that people were expressing, pleasurement or about displeasure on the fact of potentially parking on 100 East, but we currently have a bike lane that may prevent you from that. I don't know if a condition in terms of putting striping or putting a sign that would just determine as a no parking place would satisfy mitigating this potential issue. But again, we've just had a fair amount of comments in regards to what will happen in terms of traffic here. The Millcreek Planning Commission moved to recommend the proposal with the condition to prohibit parking on 900 East in front of this property. The current property meets the C code, the commercial zone. And again, we didn't really, or myself as staff do not really recommend any further conditions of approval just based on even this anticipated detrimental effects. However, staff and planning commission may discuss these detrimental effects and whether they need certain conditions to be mitigated. I think we could mitigate these issues through our code, but if there is a reason or a suggestion for a potential condition, I'll be open to hear it. This will, again, need a review for a subdivision plat and obviously further review for a final approval. So with that being said, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve application CUP 26003 and SD 26002 as presented, unless during the hearing you find facts that may contradict this proposal. And so I move that the Planning Commission recommends approval of application CU 25006 SD 26002 as presented.
Thank you, Carlos. Do we have the applicant with us?
He is online.
Is he still? There we go. Thank you. Is there anything you'd like to add to Carlos's presentation?
Much to add. I appreciate Carlos and everything he's worked with us on these past few months getting this done. As far as the parking goes, that I'm happy to work with the city and all of you guys on that. That's been something we've handled on multiple other projects, typically by painting curbs and having posted signage and agreements with towing companies to manage that, so that if anything becomes an issue, the HOA is able to mitigate that risk immediately. The balconies facing the neighboring property, I am amenable, and I can talk to the property owners about this. I'm amenable to increasing foliage if needed, or also looking at doing ground level patios that will be obstructed more by shrubbery to meet that requirement. As far as I'm aware, the north end of their property where that fiveplex sits is more of their yard and less of their house, but I understand their desire. Additionally, we're planning to install a 6-foot vinyl white fence along that property line that will help. So if ground floor patios are better for that application, we can look at that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Commissioners, are there questions for the applicant or for staff? All right, with no questions, I will open the public hearing for this application. Is there anyone online?
It's not a hearing and there are no comments.
Oh. In that case, I'll close it. You're right. And bring it back for discussion, questions, and a motion. So, Carlos, I just want to clarify. You mention, and the applicant is amenable to a rear patio instead of balconies, to taller landscaping screening, and striping or signing 9th East to mitigate these standards, but you don't recommend them be conditions?
Oh, no. What I mean is that I didn't necessarily see them as putting conditions, but again, it's up to you as a body to recommend them. And I could certainly, I don't see why not enforce them, but either way, again, it was just a matter of whether we wanted to put a condition or not. Because we could potentially work with them, but a condition may just, again, force them to do so.
Got it. Okay.
And as you reflect on this detrimental effects, right?
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. All right, commissioners, what do we think?
I like the idea of the the patio over the balcony and the higher foliage, and so if that could be somehow put into the plan, I think that would be good. I understand, and the parking is a concern. We're back to parking.
I agree on both those points. A question for staff: is the striping and signing no parking on 9th East, is that really on the developer, on the applicant, or is that more on our Public Works Department?
With the, so on 9th East itself,
Yeah.
that would ultimately be a work order from our Salt Lake County operations people. So, I mean, it would be something we would need to do.
So it doesn't make sense to impose it as a condition here.
No, but I think maybe the balcony patio thing does, and you could, in your motion, advise the city, right, to consider, a striping plan for 9th East and no parking.
I agree. That's where my head is at. That I think the patio in the back instead of balconies and landscape screening are appropriate conditions, but not striping and signing on 9th East, although I do think parking is a concern and the city should take measures to address that.
I agree.
Anyone else? Is there a motion? If not, I will move.
I was looking for it to come up.
I will move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of application CU 25-006 and SD 26001 as presented with the conditions that rear patios be included instead of balconies, that taller landscape screening be required along the east perimeter, and that's it. Oh, yes, and recommend to the city as part of the motion that measures be taken to prohibit parking on 9th East in front of the property. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Motion by Larson, second by Burgess. Let's do a voice vote here. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Victoria? She said aye. Thank you. That passes unanimously. Thank you so much for your patience. All right. That concludes our public business. Let's move on to approval of the March 18th, 2026 regular meeting minutes. And I will move that we approve the March 18th, 2026 regular meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion by Larson, second by Richardson. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. All right, Housing Subcommittee report.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Larson. So earlier this week, I met with the Millcreek Youth Council and to give them a presentation, a high-level overview of some of the proposals we're considering, and also held a discussion about affordable housing in Millcreek and what that means. In addition to that, we had an exercise where we got a big map of Millcreek, and I asked all of the members of the Youth Council to indicate where they live currently in the city and where they'd like to live. And there was a surprising, they all have really good taste because they all want to live in the East Benches. So there was some more maps and some more information that show just how expensive those homes are over there. So I think on average they're about $1 million. So we had a really nice long discussion about what that means, maybe some ways to address housing affordability, what kind of trade-offs you'd look for if you were to move to an urban center like Millcreek Common here, importance of public transportation, cycling infrastructure, et cetera. But it was really nice engagement, and we kind of ended on me explaining how the zoning code here in Millcreek has actually changed, and ways for them to stay engaged. So I let them know that the city will be updating its general plan next fiscal year. And so I encouraged all of them to participate in that process. And I will be in touch with their lead advisor, Christy Perajuli, going forward on future engagement opportunities. So that was with the Millcreek Youth Council this week. And then earlier this afternoon, the Housing Subcommittee met here at Millcreek Common, and we discussed some next steps for our small lot and other housing reforms. So as I just mentioned, the city will be updating the general plan this next fiscal year, and we've decided as a group to roll any of those proposed changes into that process. And that serves a number of reasons. There's a number of reasons why we decided to do that. The first being that is likely to be the most public engagement that we would receive for those proposals. So we acknowledge that they probably be strong feelings on both sides for these proposals. So we want as much public engagement as possible to have a robust record to show the Planning Commission and City Council and Millcreek and the community councils where residents lie on these proposed changes. So we're looking forward to that. We will also be inviting the community councils to lunch here with the Housing Subcommittee to start initial conversations about what these proposed changes will look like. So we're looking forward to that dialogue and engagement, and I will keep this body updated with future going-ons. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
Happy to take any questions. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, Francis.
None for me. Thank you.
And with that, we just need one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Richardson, second by Anderson. We all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.